Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Eduardo Pineda, and I am your moderator for today's session of the 2020 Entrepreneur Summit. This is our 9th annual E-Summit, and it's our first year bringing this event online, so we're incredibly excited and hope that you are too. In a few minutes, you'll hear from our workshop sponsor and our panelists. In addition to providing a variety of services to the community, Hispanic Unity of Florida is also deeply involved in civic engagement. There are two important ways for you to get involved in the community this year as well. One is by responding to the census and by voting. Of course, we encourage you to do both. Small business owners in Broward, we ask you to help our county, Broward County, get counted in the 2020 census by taking 15 minutes to have your employees and yourself fill out the census. For more information and material around the census, please contact or email Otto Valenzuela, and you have his email address in the screen. The upcoming general election is taking place on Tuesday, November 3rd, and the deadline to register to vote is October 5th. Please visit becomeavoter.org to register and make sure your voice is heard and your vote is heard as well. Next, a few housekeeping rules. You'll be able to ask questions through the Q&A feature on the Zoom control panel. We will select questions to be addressed live by our guest, or we will type a response for all other attendees to see. If we type a response, your question will appear to others as well. This webinar is being recorded. Within 24 hours, you will receive a link to this recording as well as to our event survey. Please complete the survey for this webinar to share your experiences and to help us improve. We ask you to please mute your device when you're not speaking, and also please silence your phones and notifications. Now, I'd like to turn it over to Tim Hoggins, our workshop sponsor from Tim Hoggins with the FPL. Tim?
Thank you. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. So again, good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Hoggins. I'm with Florida Pound Light Company, and we're a proud sponsor of the Crisis Marketing 101 lessons learned from COVID-19, pandemic, and more. You know, we at FPL, we believe in making sure that everyone remains safe during this time, and we do have a plan with regards to the pandemic, and more importantly, with restoring power. We know how important it is as we approach the peak of hurricane season. So we have a plan, and we ask that everyone else has a plan as well. As FPL, your utility provider, if you would please take a moment to go online after this session and look at some of the great benefits that we have for small business owners, for people that live in South Florida. You have to be careful and keep awareness of scams that are happening throughout the area with people during this particular time, and making sure that you have a plan with regards to your COVID as well. So a little bit more about the session as we talk through this. There are a lot of resources that are online at healthesummit.org, and you can get more information on how you can actually lower your FPL and sign up for alerts by way of our FPL app. The goal for today's session is to ensure that you get informed, get connected, and get inspired. We have a wonderful panelist of what you're going to learn a little bit more about right now. So up first is Leslie Curtil Franco, I apologize, Account Director with O'Connell and Goldberg Public Relations. And also we have Eileen Escuero, Instructor and Graduate Degree of the Global Strategic Communications Master's Degree Program at Florida International University. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Leslie, and it's a pleasure having you both here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim, and welcome Eileen and Leslie. Thank you, Tim, again for introducing our panelists. And I guess we'll jump right into our discussion. Can you share Eileen and Leslie, can you share some examples of the best crisis marketing communication you have seen from a small business? And for the audience, please, can you define what a crisis is and the different types of crises, and also give us examples of how a business may respond differently based on the different types of crisis? So maybe we'll start with Eileen.
Thank you. I think it's important to set the stage, right? So different folks might define crises in a different sort of way, but I think one of the overarching issues of a crisis is that it's basically a time of disruptive difficulty or challenges that require, at the end of the day, methodical and coordinated responses. And for most of us, we tend to think of crises in a couple of different ways, from a disaster standpoint, like a hurricane that we are familiar with, and in this case, also the pandemic, but also from an organizational standpoint. Something is going awry in a particular organization. And right now in the headlines, we have, for example, what's going on with the Ellen DeGeneres show. So when we look at them from the perspective of disaster, it's very often something that's unexpected and it's happening to us. We really didn't have much control over it. Organizational, sometimes it's you know, a bad actor, a mistake, and perhaps we would have had a little bit more control over that situation had we planned it out a little bit differently. But Leslie, I'll switch over to you so that you can chime in as well.
Sure. You know, I agree 100% with Eileen. There's disaster, you know, that is the hurricanes or the tornadoes that we see a lot, flash flooding, which we've been seeing, especially in some of the Eastern countries right now. There's the organizational piece of it too, but then I would also add a third one. We're in an election year right now, and policy crisis is a big thing. We saw that with DACA. We saw that with international students coming back to school. This is going to be kind of a big thing in this year as well. So we're seeing where organizations or businesses or companies also have to shift tack and address something that's happened because of the political or government landscape that's also happening right now. When we talk about some how to communicate, and ones that I've really liked so far, it kind of runs the gamut. So when you talk about how to address a crisis, like Eileen said, it depends on what it is and how you address it. And then also what your mission is as a company, how you decide to respond to that crisis. So, you know, one of the ones that I love right now was CVS. They started doing these pharmacy chats because of the pandemic. So they started putting out all these little videos on YouTube of, you know, talking to a physician and just kind of going 1, 2, 3 FAQs. They started putting it on their websites. They started building an entire awareness campaign around it because that's their mission. They're all about medicine and health. And I really, really liked that because it was so grassroots. It was so low to the ground. Let's get to where everyone is. Let's not put millions of dollars behind it.
Yeah, I've seen that one. It's actually a good approach. And I think a lot of us have also seen, as far as the pandemic goes, messages very often showing up as commercials. And so you've got Amazon commercials all over the place talking about not just how they function and the logistical component of Amazon getting the packages to you, but what they're doing in terms of keeping their employees safe, which then in turn should keep you safe in terms of, you know, handling the packages that have just been delivered to you. And so there are a lot of opportunities for organizations and for companies to share that message. Sometimes though, we do have to be careful because we don't want it to seem like we're just checking something off on a box, like, oh, I should put out this message so that my constituents are aware that I am aware of the situation going on in the universe. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that they always have to come from a good and honest place of communication. I want to share something with my customers, with my employees, with my constituents, because I think it's important to do so, because I want to make sure that they understand either steps that I'm taking or concerns that I'm having, or the situation that we're involved in. And so I think that if the basis of it is a legitimate and honest desire to communicate with customers and employees and constituents, that's the best place to start. When it feels a little trite, or it feels like something that I have to do, sometimes we have the unintended consequence of having our constituents maybe look down on us a little bit or not consider it an authentic message.
Thank you, Eileen and Leslie. Great responses. And I have seen the CVS commercial. It's really good. So as a reminder to all of our attendees, if you have any questions for our panelists, please send them via the Q&A feature on your Zoom panel. So now for our next discussion point, this is another question for Leslie and Eileen. As a business owner, what steps do I need to take in advance of a crisis so that I'm ready to communicate with all of my stakeholders?
Oh, wow, that's that's a big one. So here's the way that I say. First, let me back up and say that, you know, my bosses at O'Connell and Goldberg, they laugh at me all the time and they call me Chicken Little. And the reason for that is because I don't wait for a crisis to happen before I'm ready for my clients. The way that I see it is that your crisis kit and what you choose to use should be part of your everyday. It's something that should be a live packet of information that you constantly go back to and revise, re-edit, reorganize, redirect. So what needs to go in there? What should you need to be considering? The first is contact information. If you're a business, who are all the people that you'd have to contact if there was a natural disaster, like for example, a hurricane, or if there was an organizational, you have your employees, your clients, do you have a supply chain that you need to be communicating with? Do you have other stakeholders or audiences that you need to consider? So for example, I'm thinking in my head, like the Broward Center for the Performing Arts, they have a bunch of people that rent out their space. They'd have to consider them as well. So you'd need a contact list. You need to make sure that you have all your passwords, all your access points so that you can access those in an easy way. I always tell my clients and recommend you should have a redundancy measure for all of your communication. You should have it on Dropbox. You should have it on a flash drive. You should have it on a hard drive so that no matter where you are or what happens, or if you lose power or internet, you can get to that information. You should consider some templated responses. To Eileen's point, you need to make sure that you don't sound robotic, but there's nothing wrong with having a couple templated responses that then you can take and tweak to whatever the situation is, because it'll make you that much faster in responding. So, you know, part of the issue with a crisis is that you're under the gun to respond or get a message out there. So what can you do to make yourself more efficient during that time? And then the third piece of it is, what kind of platforms are you going to need to be able to communicate? You know, think through the process. Is this something that I need to send over email? Is it something where, you know, do I have a regulatory body that I need to communicate to and send this information to? For example, I'm thinking of, you know, Fort Lauderdale Airport when they had the shooting. They have the FAA they have to report to. What happens if there's no power or internet? How do I communicate? Is it text message? Is it flyers? Is it, you know, renting a plane to screenwrite in the sky? I mean, so I think those are all the pieces. Is be Chicken Little. Take inventory of your business and understand it so that you know what you need in that toolkit. Have it ready, but then don't George Foreman it. Don't set it and forget it. Go back and look at it constantly to make sure that it's refreshed and ready to go.
I agree so much. And quite frankly, I also think that one of the big issues that we find ourselves when we're running a business, we're running a business. And so we're looking at the day in and the day out. And did we make the quota? And are the accounts balanced? And do we have enough inventory? And did we pay the rent? All of those things that are very, very important, the overhead component of it. But I also think it's important to recognize that it does not do us a great deal of good if the first time our employees hear from us, or our clients hear from us, or our customers hear from us is when there is a problem. These are very much relationship-driven situations. And when we have good relationships with our customers and our employees and our supply chain folks, then we've got a stronger base to communicate in when we've got a problem. You know, when things are great, things are great. When things are challenging or confusing, and again, we go back to the pandemic, where every day there could be a shift in policy, in ordinance, in how it is that you can run your business. Can your business be open right now? Are there limitations in how many individuals can be at your storefront in any given time? When the information is changing so quickly, it becomes difficult for the customer base if they haven't been hearing from you prior to this situation, especially when that's this fluid. And so baked into the process of, do I have enough inventory? Do I have, you know, my establishment staffed for whatever hours I'm open? We need to, at the very beginning, consider how it is that we want to establish that relationship with our customers, with our employees, and with those other constituents that are part of our day-to-day.
Thank you, Eileen and Leslie. Now, we'll pause to take a few questions from our attendees. Again, I remind you to please use the Q&A feature on your device to type in your question. We may read your question out loud for the panelists to respond, or we will type a response to you. We have a question for our panelists. So the first question is, for the templated responses, what kinds of things should I communicate? So Leslie, talking about the template and having some responses or already pre-made in a template, what kind of things should I communicate for the templated responses?
So first and foremost, my biggest thing is that you always have to be honest. You have to be honest. You have to be transparent. If coronavirus has taught us anything, it's that people are smart and the internet has a very long memory. And if you are not being honest and transparent with your community, then they're going to see right through it. So that's number one. You should be looking at all these templates through that lens. That's number one. Number two is these templated responses, you should, again, consider who your stakeholders are. Are you emailing a regulatory body where you have to report something that happened? That's going to be very clear cut, to the point, and factual. If you're emailing your supply chain, same thing. It's got to be very informative, clear cut, factual, but also, you know, sharing with them how this could potentially affect them. And those have to be as far in advance as you can to give them time to plan. To Eileen's point, do you need overhead? Are you going to need things in stock because a hurricane's coming? You need to give them time to plan. And then if you're talking about your customer base, it really depends on what your industry is. If you're a restaurant, are you communicating safety measures that you are taking because of the pandemic? Are you communicating new store hours? Are you communicating contactless drive-through or food pickup? If you're a hospital or a healthcare facility, are you communicating compassion? Are you communicating awareness? Are you communicating testing information? So it really depends on what your industry is and what the goal is. But then the other piece of it is to Eileen's point, it's got to be often. It's got to be frequent. This is not a time to hide. This is a time to be communicating and keeping that relationship strong. So for every, you know, I guess a part of that would also be for every one or two informative messages that you're sending out there. Oh, we're doing contactless this. Oh, these are our hours. You should be putting something in that's nice or compassionate or kind. Just, you know, a touch point of like, hey, I'm still here. You know, one of the things that O'Connell and Goldberg we talk about a lot is good people make good news. Be part of the good news cycle. Share something that made you happy or that is cool about your industry. That's something interesting maybe the industry did together. For example, I'm thinking of, you know, truck drivers that got together and did this whole caravan of PPE to New York. If your supply chain, that's something cool you'd want to read about. So it's not just all negative. You shouldn't be thinking uptight about your crisis comms. Like, it should include some of that too.
Thank you, Leslie. Now, for the second question from our attendees, we have, what should I tell my suppliers or vendors when I have a crisis?
So that depends. And that's one of the challenges, right? That there isn't a formula necessarily that says this is what you need to say in all cases. Not all cases are the same. And we look again at the pandemic as one that is so fluid, and it impacts different organizations in very, very different ways. But in terms of, regardless of what the specificity is, what you have to convey to your suppliers, to your vendors, to whomever, is what are your needs, where are your challenges, and where can you perhaps help each other. And so if you're reaching out to a vendor saying, I am 100% out of Lysol, as everybody is, you know, those are the conversations that you need to have with your vendor, and it shouldn't be somebody who you've never spoken to before. I mean, in theory, this is your rep, this is somebody who you already have a relationship with, so that you can have that honest dialogue. And when the vendor says, you know what, you're not going to see Lysol again until 2021, love you, but it's just not going to happen prior to that, then you have to take that information and convey it to your customers. Love you, customers, but you're not going to see Lysol in this store until 2021, but these are my alternatives. And so that's the relationship that you need to have with the vendor. The vendor says, I can't get you Lysol, but maybe I can get you this. And it works in a similar fashion. And so you then can educate your consumer. It isn't Lysol, it's this other product. And it works this way, that way, and the other way. And I have that available to you so that I can meet your needs. It's a two-way conversation with your vendor. It's a two-way conversation with your customer base. But I think, again, based on honesty, and these are my needs, what is your situation, and the vendor supplying that information as well.
Thank you, Eileen, and thank you to our attendees for the two questions. Now we're going to move on to our next discussion point. So my next question has two parts. My team is not tech savvy. I have a team of two, and my team is not tech savvy. What ways can we communicate with our customers? And also, what are some of the free or low cost tools that we can use to communicate with our customers?
So, I think that you may not necessarily need an ultra technological solution. Again, it depends on who we're communicating with. If you have that small team in terms of your employees, communicating to them might be text, it might be through WhatsApp, it might be through phone call, it might be a much easier and personalized exchange. When reaching out to your customers, again, it may depend on how deep that customer base is. And if you have been collecting some of their contact information, it may be through email, it may be through WhatsApp, it may be through a social media channel that you've already been previously established on. So it is, again, not formulaic. It is the kind of thing that it depends on your organization, who your team members are, and who your customer base is. If you have a very young customer base, perhaps the ultra technological approach does work. If you've got a different demographic who maybe is not as comfortable in that technological sphere, and your employees may not necessarily be as comfortable in that technological sphere, sometimes old-fashioned communication is the right way, an email, a flyer, some other form of communication. So it is individualized, and you have to take a good hard look at who your team members are, what their skill sets are, where do they feel comfortable, and then what are the needs of your consumers. So there is a lot of work that has to happen on the front end from the business side to understand who the consumer is and who the customer is.
I would agree 100% with Eileen. It all depends, and it all depends on the industry that you're in. If you are a small business owner and you own a restaurant versus if you're a small business owner and you're an accountant versus if you're a small business owner that has a lawn service, those are three very different industries, very different clients with very different motives. I am a big fan of old school. We are seeing that a lot more right now during this pandemic because people are home. I'm seeing a lot more in-home flyers and stuff coming through the mail. I'm seeing a lot more signs in people's yards. Right now it's the middle of hurricane season. People need to bring their palm fronds down. One of the lawn service people in my neighborhood started putting signs out front of people's houses that they service. Yeah, hey, that's a great idea. It's so old school. It's so grassroots. But, if you don't have a tech savvy team and they're out in the field, take advantage of them, use them. What else can you do? Again, if you're a pool service, put the logo huge on the truck so people see it as you drive through. So that too, what is in your everyday that you can use and take advantage of? And then 100%, you should be taking inventory of who your clients are and making a list. And that list can be written. It could be an Excel spreadsheet. It could be something as fancy as a client management system. But you have to keep your client list, whether that's phone numbers, email addresses, whatever it is, however you plan to communicate with them. There are a lot of tools out there that can help you communicate. There's all kinds of free tools, like for example, a Survey Monkey, if you need to send out a survey to your clients and see how you did, if you want to use testimonials, MailChimp to send out e-blasts. Another one that actually and I use this example because I think they're brilliant, but my lawn care service, because right before that hurricane, the scare that we just had came through, he sent all of the clients a doodle poll. And he said, hey, listen, if you need to bring down your palm fronds, I've got the next 4 days free. Schedule your time in half-hour blocks. I'll come and bring down your palm fronds. I was like, that is great. What a great way to communicate with us in a very short amount of time because we're all stressing and preparing for this hurricane. So definitely, there are so many resources out there. Sometimes all you got to do is just Google and say, hey, free email system, free scheduling system, free data management system, and it pops up.
Thank you, Leslie and Eileen, again. So I have another question for you, Eileen and Leslie. What are the key messages to communicate to prospects and customers before, during, and after a crisis? So what are the key messages to communicate?
Again, and I know it sounds like it's pre-recorded. It's not. It depends. It depends on what we're dealing with. But in terms of, a hurricane, which we all have a little bit more familiarity with, I think it is important in those instances to, again, be upfront with your employees, with your customers, with whomever it is who has to intersect with you on we're aware it's happening. We know, we're watching. And I think that that's always a good starting point. Letting your universe know that there's a situation out there. So we're watching the tropics. We know that there is a storm. We're keeping an eye on it. We're going to give you more information as things develop. And that immediately gives your constituents a sense of like, okay, they're on it, they got it. And as we go into, again, through a hurricane, we know that it's within, 36 hours, we're going to adjust our hours. We inform our customers and our employees about that. And then we're going to shut down. We let them know. And as soon as we have a sense of when we're going to be able to reopen, we start sharing that as well. So you go through that continuum. If you've had some sort of damage, then you have to convey that as well. We're not going to be able to reopen when we originally thought we were because we don't have any power. Or we're going to be on generator power instead. Or we're going to be closed for another week because there was flooding. All of that. So as soon as you have the details, then you start to share that with your constituents. The pandemic being a different animal, and that's why there's never a one size fits all answer, because crises are different and we have to approach them differently. The pandemic has been a little bit different because depending on where you are, there may be ordinances that are particular to your organization. If you have customers who are coming from different areas of the county or different areas of South Florida, what might be a rule in their universe is not the same rule in your universe. So you have to be very clear about these are the rules today, and they may change tomorrow, depending on curfews, depending on all of these other changing situations. So it's been a challenge. And I think that in terms of all of these crises that we sometimes find ourselves in, that we have to ask our employees, our customers, our constituents to understand and to be patient, that we're being patient with the situation, but we need them to be patient with the situation as well, that we are trying our best. There are some things that we can control. There are some things that we can't control. But being upfront in terms of what some of these situations are and that they are subject to change, I think is important, because we don't want somebody to be like, hey, you told me that your hours were, 9 to 4, and now I find out that they're 9 to 3. Yes, because the curfew changed, let's say. And so we have to provide all of that context and understand that not everybody's going to read and not everybody's going to be up to date. And so we have to also be as polite as possible. Understand that the person on the other end is dealing with the same challenges and that we're all in this together, and we have to try and navigate it in the most professional and compassionate way possible. So
My whole thing here is that I think one of the biggest differences between a normal crisis is usually a crisis, as Eileen was saying, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they're usually a very short amount of time. Even a corporate crisis, if you had like a data breach or something, it's very short amount of time. And your customer base, their memory is short-lived. They forget. What we're seeing with the pandemic is, first of all, we all started out, I love the memes where it's like, hey, here's where I was in March and here's where I am now, and you look like, Adam and Eve at the end. Because we all started out with hope. This is short. This is a short-lived crisis. That's what we've been trained to believe, and it's going to be over. Well, we really have to start shifting our expectations and believe that this really is the new normal. I mean, this is not going to go away. This pandemic is going to change a lot of what we do, both on policy, like Eileen said, but also the way that we conduct business. And I think at this point, we all need to take a step back and reassess and say, okay, how much of this is, I guess triage. How much of this really is short-lived and how much of this now is going to become part of my day-to-day? And tackle it from there. The second piece of it is that you have to remember that your employees, your customer base, your supply chain, everyone is just overloaded with information. I'm thinking about myself. I'm holed up in my bedroom right now. My son is having his first day of school outside on an iPad, and my 1-year-old is running around the table probably screaming at him because she wants to play with the cord. So, I'm distracted 90% of the day and trying to do 10 things at once. So are your clients, so are your employees. So the other advice that I'd give is say it again, say it a third time. Say it over and over and over and over again. Use as many different communications channels as possible. You know, I work for a small business entrepreneur. My father's a small business entrepreneur. Every day they're emailing, texting, calling, putting it on the website, putting it on social media. There's a sign on the door to our business. You know, it's a million different ways that we can communicate we're doing, because they might miss it the first time, or they might not be on this channel when you posted it there on Instagram at 11 o'clock on Wednesday morning. So, you know, you have to think of that too. How many different ways can I put it? If on a normal day, it takes 7 touch points to convert a fan to a customer, imagine what it is right now. And keep that in the back of your head.
Wow, yeah. Great answer. We'll now take a pause to take a few questions from our attendees. Again, I remind you to please use the Q&A feature on your device to type in your question. So our next question from our attendees is the following. Are there any differences I should consider when communicating to my customers if I have a brick and mortar store versus an online business? So are there any differences in communicating to customers if there's a brick and mortar store versus an online business?
Aside from the obvious of, you know, can I go to your store and pick up this item? Can I come visit you in person? A lot of it is going to be the same. You know, even if you're an e-business, you still have a warehouse where you have stuff, where maybe there are certain policies in place within your county about curfews or about what you can and cannot do, or how many employees you're allowed in the warehouse. You have a supply chain that supports you that also has to follow those same policies and guidelines. You still have to communicate health regulations. As Eileen said at the beginning, Amazon has been out front talking about health and safety, and they're considered an e-business versus brick and mortar. I think a lot of what we're doing right now, it has to be very similar. Also because your client base is online. You know, they're not out and about as much as they used to, or as frequently as they used to. I think in South Florida, the last count was almost 50%, 40-something% of employees are still working from home. So regardless if you're brick and mortar or digital, you're still having to communicate them and figure out a way to get in their house because they're not coming to you.
All right. For our fourth attendee question, when you are developing your message, how important is empathy, especially during a crisis? So how important is empathy?
It's so important because, again, it's human beings communicating with human beings, and an organization, a business, is not absent of the human connection. And so what I am going through as a business owner, I am probably also going through as a consumer of something. I am the consumer of goods and services, regardless of my role as a business owner. And so I straddle two worlds. So I have to put myself in the shoes of the individual who's coming to me for support, for help, for product, for service, for my employees are looking to me for guidance. And we're all in this situation collectively. And so I think that we absolutely need to convey the fact that I am with you as a customer, as an employee, as a constituent. I'm going through this too. And so I may not have answers to some of your questions. It's not that I don't want to answer them. I just don't have them because we societally do not have the answers to some of these questions. And I think we go back to this idea of we need to be honest. I am honestly sharing with you my universe, whatever that might be, that my store hours are changed, that I don't have the products that you want, that, I am working remotely instead of in my traditional shop. that for my employees, I want you to work from home. I don't want you to come into the office, whatever that might be. And so I just have to come from a place of honesty. And I think the empathy follows with that. I think it goes hand in hand. That I'm not trying to put on airs. I'm not trying to make this like, oh, everything's fine. No, everything's not fine. We're all going through a challenging time, but we are hopefully going through it together.
And I think, you know, when I look at it from a writing perspective, and when I write things, especially in PR, you never want things in passive voice, you want it in active voice, right? So if we think about how our community has responded when people say thoughts and prayers, there's a lot of backlash to that because it's words, it's not actions. So when we talk about compassion and empathy, what can your company do to make that active? You know, to Eileen said, you know, I don't care what it costs me, my employees are going to stay home. It's the right thing to do. Hey, listen, we've been fortunate through all of this, so we're going to donate back. Or, hey, I'm a restaurant, so I don't have the same number of clients, but I can afford to bring some of the same inventory in to keep my supply chain happy, but then I'm going to donate that and give it to people who might need it. So what can you do to make that empathy active, which is really going to go a long way for your customer base?
That's a great way of putting it. Active. I think that's a great point that we have to apply. Now for the next question from our attendees is, I have a small budget, so what's the most bang for your buck for printing? For example, flyers, signs, etc. So if I have a small budget, what's the most bang for your buck for printing? That's a tough one.
Now, well, and I don't, and perhaps it's just maybe me needing a little bit more clarification on that question in terms of, is it the kind of printing or the place to print? You know, and different printing houses right now are probably providing different competitive pricing, because there may be an extra need or an extra desire to get a little bit more business in-house. But in terms of actual product, you know, sometimes flyers work great. Then the question is, what is it that you do with these flyers, and what is your distribution method? And those, I think, are some of the things that we also have to consider. If it's the kind of thing that somebody's going to walk up and down a neighborhood and leave something on people's doors or in people's mailboxes, then, you know, that's a certain kind of product. It doesn't necessarily need to be an 8x10, and it doesn't need to be glossy, but maybe it does need to have some sort of film on it in case it gets wet or something like that, that it doesn't completely degrade. But I think more than the item is, how is it that it's being distributed? And so, you know, if it's something that's being handed out and somebody's going door to door, it's a different situation versus I still have a storefront and people are coming in and I'm handing something to them as they come in. So I think we have to probably look a little bit deeper into what the organization is and what is the intent. Is the intent to say we're open? Is the intent to say I'm here to do, you know, a particular job, like Leslie was mentioning in terms of the lawn service? It's hurricane season. I can help you because there's a potential storm out there, which is a much more immediate need versus I've reopened, or you know, I'm establishing new hours or whatever that may be. So again, there isn't that one size fits all, and we have to do a little bit of extra digging to figure out what makes most sense for an organization.
Thank you, Lynn. And here's our final discussion point before we close with our final thoughts and closing remarks. So I don't have good news for my stakeholders. Bad news. Should I communicate with them? And if so, what's the best way to communicate with them?
Yes, you need to communicate with them. And we have to communicate. We go back to what I was saying before. I need my customers to hear from me, and I want them to hear from me first, because if they're hearing from other people, then perhaps what they're getting is rumor or innuendo. And so whether it's good news or it's bad news, and if it's bad news of my own doing, again, in the case of Ellen DeGeneres and what's going on with that show right now, if it's something that went wrong institutionally, the sooner you can address it, and the more accurately and honestly you can address it, the better. Because otherwise then it's so-and-so was on the show and they said, yeah, it was horrible conditions, and I had my personal experience and it was terrible. And then you have some people who are supporting. So you're getting a lot of noise and a lot of detail from a lot of people, and not from the head of this organization. And so her coming out this week and saying, all right, well, this is what the investigation has shown, and this is what we're going to be doing about it moving forward. And we've had people who are no longer in the positions that they used to be in, and there's going to be a new team coming in to help guide us in the right direction. Those are hard things to say, because you have to admit that there's a problem. And in her case, she's coming forward and apologizing for these problems. That's very hard to do. Even though as children we've been taught you must apologize when you do something wrong, it's harder to do it in a work setting very often, because there's liability associated with it. But in the case of good or bad, it is your responsibility to reach out to your constituents, again, whether they're internal or external, and share with them, we've got a problem, and then this is what we're doing to help mitigate the problem, and this is what we're hopefully going to do moving forward so that the problem doesn't repeat itself, and give that sense of a cycle that's being looked at from beginning to end.
I think there's two things here that I want to add. The first one is you have to think about your communications, your crisis communications, as an onion, right? So you have these layers, and you have to start at the very, very, very center. And the very, very center are your employees. If they hear about it on the news, or they hear about it at the same time as your customers, they're going to be like, what the heck? What is going on? So you have to start at your core and your center, and then kind of work your way out from there. So employees, number one. Supply chain, number two. Any regulatory, if you're a restaurant, versus if you're an airline, versus if you're a college or university right now. Like, for example, I'm thinking UNC last night had to yesterday shut down because they had 200 positive cases. So you have to kind of go out from there, and then your customers. But then to the point of, higher ed, your customers, your first thought is, oh, those are my students. But yeah, students have parents, and students have mentors, and students have internships, and students have all these other things going on that now branch out even further. So you really have to look at that first and see, who am I communicating with? When am I communicating with them? And how? Number one. And number two, you really have to sit down and say, okay, I've now communicated, as Eileen was saying, we'll stick with the Ellen DeGeneres example because I think it's a good one. She comes out, she finally addresses it after lots of quiet, and then people start roasting her on Twitter with her own tweets saying, oh, this one didn't age well. It just came out this morning. There was a tweet that she said, I just made one of my employees cry. Got to admit, it made me feel good. Like, bad timing. So, think about that too. Okay, I've addressed it. This is what we're going to do to fix it. But what could come next? Are there any other skeletons? Is there maybe a second wave of this? Like, for example, if it's an FAA investigation, is it going to come out and say that we were negligent? Like, what do we do then? Oh my gosh. And so you have to consider all the way through that too. And the other piece of it is your constituents, both your employees and your customers, as Eileen said, they don't want to hear you complain. They want to hear you admit and be honest, but then what are you going to do about it? How are you going to fix it? The same thing that, I always tell my team members, don't just come to me with a problem. Tell me how you're going to fix it. Bring some suggestions to the table. Let's talk about it and let's come with it. So you got to do the same thing to your employees, and you got to do the same thing with your clients.
Thank you again, Eileen and Leslie. Thank you again as well to our workshop sponsor, FPL. Now we'll take our final round of questions and comments before the final thoughts and closing remarks. So our following question is, should I be on all the social media platforms to communicate in regards to the crisis? Should I be on all social media platforms?
That is a hard no from me. Again, Eileen mentioned earlier today that you really have to consider your constituent base. Are they older or are they really young and savvy? If you have a really young client base, then you should be on Instagram or Snapchat or even TikTok. If you have an older client base, maybe it's Facebook. And you also have to consider the industry that you're in. If you're an accounting firm, I don't know if TikTok's going to be the right fit for you, but LinkedIn, that's a great one to be in. If you're in the healthcare field, there's ZocDoc and there's these other WebMD and these other things that maybe you should be there instead. So I think it depends, number one, on the industry you're in, and number two, the age of your client base. And if you don't know the answer to that, because you're now starting to form that client roster and taking a look, there's nothing wrong with trying a couple of different platforms and testing it out and seeing how engagement goes. But so you have to remember that social media takes a lot of commitment. You can't just do a post and then forget it for a month. You have to be consistent and be creative. So if you're a very small shop, like we were talking before, maybe one is all you need.
I agree, and it all depends on the client base and the industry. There are so many different factors, but it doesn't hurt to try and see if it works. Now, for our next question, and this is a good one. For example, with a hurricane, we know when it's time to get back to marketing as usual. With the pandemic of COVID-19, how do we know when it's time to get back to marketing as usual?
I don't know that we know. And that's the challenge with something like this. It's something that none of us have experience with. It's something that is new across the board, something of this magnitude, something that is global in nature, something that has impacted communities in such different ways, depending on whether you're in a hotspot or an epicenter, or whether you're in an area that maybe hasn't seen as much in the way of cases or hospitalizations. And so there isn't a tried and true answer to that right now. I think that we have to be very vigilant with what is going on in terms of cases and what the ordinances are and what your particular community is allowing and not allowing. And we have to be sensitive to the fact that, as Leslie had mentioned, we've got a lot of distracted individuals right now in our community. School is starting back up. We still have a lot of individuals who are working from home. They're trying to balance that, the home and the school again, kind of like what we did in the spring. And I think that we, again, have to be patient and take it day by day and see when we get to more of a sense of normalcy, and what does normalcy seem, and maybe a different normal than it was before. And so our communication strategies might have to evolve as well in order to manage whatever it is our communities are dealing with in that particular moment.
Thank you, Eileen. And we only have a few minutes left for one last question from our attendees. The next question and final question is there a liability for my company when I admit a mistake? And how do I limit that liability? What if I don't have a plan for fixing the mistake yet?
Ooh, that is a tough one. So it's so hard because, I always feel like the legal team and the communications team, we're always on two ends of the rope on this tug of war of, we got to communicate. No, don't you dare. We got to communicate. Please don't do that yet. So I think, you know, when it comes to regulatory agencies, and if you can, you should, you know, like we were talking about before, have honest conversations with your supply chain, have an honest conversation with your legal team and say, hey, if this were to happen, you know, be a Chicken Little. Hey, if this were to happen, what are my liabilities here? What do I need to know? When do I need to communicate? So for example, I'm thinking of like a data breach. You have to report that within 30 days. Within 120 days, you should have rectified the situation. And within 6 months, you should have plans in place to make sure that it doesn't happen again, right? So you have a timeline with that. You know what you can and cannot say. So in that situation, maybe it's, you don't want to announce it right away. You want to announce it after that 30 days, you know, when you've had that first piece in. Because yeah, you know, your legal eagles will tell you, please don't admit the mistake because that doesn't give me grounds to help you out here. If that is the case and you cannot admit to all this stuff, that's where the empathy piece comes in. And you tell your customer base what you can say. Listen, guys, we know this is so frustrating. We are doing our best to rectify it, and we're undergoing an investigation to figure this out. Please bear with us. You appeal to human nature in that respect. But again, once you understand what your liabilities are, then maybe you need to get your legal team and your PR team in the same room to hash it out and talk it out. You know, in the agency that I work at in O'Connell and Goldberg, we do that a lot. You know, we talk to our clients and say, hey, what do I need to know regulatory wise here? And do you have, you know, legal counsel in-house or on staff that I need to talk to so that we can understand how we can coexist?
Thank you, Leslie. And before we wrap up, we're going to hear some of the final thoughts from our panelists. We'll start with Leslie.
Can I pass it to Eileen first?
Okay, Eileen.
I just answered that last question, so I'd love for her to go.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, I mean, I think just, and I know I sound repetitive and it's not my intention, but I think that we have to, in all aspects of crisis, we need to spend time. It is a deliberate effort in order to really think about those worst case scenarios and what our approaches could be to them. Who do we have to communicate with? What those target audiences are. I mean, I tend to say, and I say it in class a lot, pick the most beautiful day, the day that you would love to be sitting by the pool, sipping on a pina colada and having, you know, a wonderful vacation day. That's the day that you need to start really thinking about what is the worst case scenario, what could really, really hurt this organization. And on those days when things are great, that's when we plan for things being not so great. In this situation, again, that we happen to find ourselves in, that would have been a little bit tough to really kind of map out, that it would have been a pandemic of this scale impacting us for such a long period of time, that we need to really be grounded in patience and flexibility and understanding that we have to take this one day by day with an end result, right? Our end goal is still to be able to service our customers and be good with our employees, but that we're going to have to be adaptive to whatever it is that's happening in the right here and now. I think we need to give ourselves latitude to just be a little bit shorter in terms of our goal setting right now, and deal with the day-to-day as much as we can.
Yeah, you know, plan for everything. You know, I always say you can literally plan for everything, and there are two things that will always mess you up: human nature and Mother Nature. So if you can plan for everything else, when those things happen, you'll be okay. So take inventory of your company and who your stakeholders are. Who do you need to talk to? Who are the, you know, the different audiences you're going to be speaking to? Take inventory of your industry. What do I do? What is the best channel for me to be using? How do I make sure that I'm ingrained on those channels now and creating the relationships I need now, so that when I gotta cash in on those relationships with either my clients or my supply chain, I'm good to go, I'm good for it. Planning ahead and having those communications already in the hopper, so that when you have to react quickly, you're ready to go and you have the pieces you need, and all you have to do is a couple of tweaks so that it sounds genuine, and they're ready to go. Make sure that your teams are in the room together. Talk to the legals, get your communications team or your PR agency in the room together to hash it out and see what you need to do and how you need to do it for every different kind of crisis that might affect your company, right? The pandemic, a natural disaster, a corporate, or even a governmental policy issue. And then finally, always be open and transparent. Just always be honest. And remember that being compassionate and being open and transparent, that's an active thing. That's not passive. So how can you take that and make it something that you embody as a company that really walks the walk after you talk the talk?
Again, Eileen and Leslie, thank you for all those inspiring thoughts. And to close, I'll turn it over to our workshop sponsor, Team Hogan's from the FPL, for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Otto, and obviously thank you to the panelists. Everyone did a phenomenal job. We appreciate the questions that were coming in today, and I think there was a lot of key takeaways, and we hope that everyone take advantage of that. Up next, we're going to challenge you all to take a look at our virtual exhibit hall and stick around for our American Dreamer panels. Discussions which starts at 10:20 a.m. Thank you again to our panelists, and make sure everyone have a great and safe day. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Eduardo Pineda, and I work at Hispanic Unity of Florida. I want to thank you today for joining HUF's 9th annual E-Summit. This is our first year bringing the event online, and we're incredibly excited and hope that you are too. In a few minutes, you'll hear from our special guests, but first, there are a few housekeeping rules. You'll be able to ask questions through the Q&A feature on your Zoom control panel. We will select questions to be addressed live by our guest, or we will type a response for all other attendees to see. If we type a response, your question will appear to others as well. This webinar is being recorded. Within 24 hours, you will receive a link to this recording, as well as to our event survey. Please complete the survey so that we can read your experiences and help us improve for our next E-Summit. We also ask you to please mute your device when you're not speaking, and please silence your phones and notifications. Today's American Dreamer Award are generously sponsored by the JM Family Enterprises and Southeast Toyota Distributors. The JM Family Enterprises is headquartered in Deerfield Beach, Florida, and it is a $15 billion diversified automotive company ranked number 20 on Forbes' list of America's largest private companies. They're truly one-of-a-kind organization and an incredibly supporter of Hispanic Unity of Florida. Since 2011, the E-Summit has recognized and shared the stories of more than 60 business women and men with a variety of backgrounds, experiences, and industry expertise. We hope that you are ready to meet this year's American Dreamer Awards. Each one of them has received an original piece of art designed and created for HUF by international artist Evelyn Valdirio. And now I'd like to turn it over to our American Dreamer Awards sponsor, John Guerrero with the JM Family Enterprises. John?
Thank you, Eduardo, and good morning to everyone. My audio okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to start by congratulating our impressive group of successful business owners that we're about to hear from. It was inspiring to listen to their individual entrepreneurial journeys and how they're living and building their own American dream. I'm fortunate to work for JM Family Enterprises. Our founder, Jim Moran's legacy is that he has built a company that is now one of the largest private companies in the United States, while also being one of the best companies to work for in the country. Two of the secrets to our success are how we treat our associates and how we embrace our community. So it is with great pleasure that we sponsor this year's American Dreamer Awards. JM Family has been a supporter of Hispanic Unity for many years. We were their first corporate partner, and today we remain a strong supporter of their programs and their organization. Please enjoy the American Dreamer panel discussion, and thank you for joining me and JM Family for today's event. I'd like to now introduce Tom Hudson. We are incredibly lucky to be joined again by Tom. In a journalism career covering news from high global finance to neighborhood infrastructure, Tom Hudson is the Vice President of News and Special Correspondent for WLRN. He hosts and produces the Sunshine Economy and anchors the Florida Roundup in addition to leading the organization's new engagement strategy. Tom was most recently the co-anchor and managing director of Nightly Business Report on public television. In that position, Tom reported on topics such as Federal Reserve interest rate policy, agriculture, and global trade. Tom writes a weekly column for the Miami Herald and the McClatchy Tribute News Service. He appears regularly on LA and Chicago-based radio stations for commentary on the economy and investment markets. Tom? Tom, you're on mute.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much, John. It's great to be with you. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thanks to for the opportunity to host the E-Summit again and host this conversation. Welcome to my house, right? As I welcome myself into your homes and places, as we all work from home and work from different places. It gives us an insight to kind of how we live and how we work during this pandemic. And that's part of the entrepreneurial journey, the pivot. And the pivot has been front and center for all kinds of companies, and how the American dreamers have responded to the pandemic and how they will continue to respond is going to be part of our conversation today. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to the 2020 American Dreamer awardees, really a very impressive group as they are each and every year. This year's awardees represent the diversity of businesses in and serving South Florida. Their backgrounds, industries, and pathways to entrepreneurship are each unique, but they all share two things in common. They've been successful and they give back to business owners and their communities. Our first American Dreamer awardee is Guillermo Billy Jaime. Billy is the founder and CEO of Social Global Leaders. That's an organization that has helped more than 500,000 individuals to improve their lives through well-constructed homes, clean water, microloans, and clean energy in rural and semi-urban Mexico. Author of the book, Social Capitalism, Connecting Wealth to the Bottom of the Pyramid, Billy is a civil engineer and has completed the Entrepreneurship and Competitiveness in Latin America program at Columbia Business School, as well as the owner and president management leadership program at Harvard Business School. Billy has been selected as the 2010 Endeavor Entrepreneur of the Year, awarded with the 2018 Forbes Magazine Trajectory Award, and is considered as one of the Mexican social business leaders. So congratulations to Billy Jaime, the founder and CEO of Social Global Leaders, for the 2020 American Dreamer Award. Congratulations, Billy. Our next awardees are Wendy Lieber and Dave Custon, co-founders of Content Bacon. It's a subscription content marketing service that builds brands that people know, like, and trust and buy from. Wendy has a passion for helping customers figure out and communicate their why, so it resonates with target audiences. She frequently speaks in entrepreneur communities about the power of storytelling and how to use it to grow business. Now, before Content Bacon, she served as Athena Marketing's president for 14 years, helping clients use marketing strategies to enhance the value of their business. Wendy is a member of Entrepreneurs Organization and a board of trustee for Women in Business. Dave has more than 20 years of experience in media, marketing, and building brands. During his career, he has worked with media giants like MGM, Sony, and Comcast, and luxury brands, consumer packaged goods, software, professional service firms, and a lot of startups. In addition to being a culinary school graduate, Dave holds a bachelor's degree in communications from Florida International University and an MBA in entrepreneurship from the H. Wayne Huizenga School of Business at Nova Southeastern University. Dave lives in South Florida and is a member of the South Florida chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization. So congratulations to Wendy and Dave with Content Bacon. Our next awardee is Claudio Sorrentino, CEO of Body Details True Laser Centers. Body Details is Southeast Florida's largest provider of cosmetic laser services. Claudio is a born entrepreneur, innovative thinker, and a growth strategist with more than 20 years of broad-based experience and expertise in operations, in finance, and business development. Claudio has grown his company into a thrice-listed Inc. 5,000 fastest growing companies in America, as well as Grow FL top 50 company to watch. Driven by a mission to help clients live life more youthfully and joyfully, Claudio has become one of the most recognized business leaders in the laser services industry. He is a graduate of Florida Atlantic University, as well as a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program. Claudio is a serial entrepreneur, author, husband, father of 3 adorable little nuggets of joy, as he calls them. Congratulations to Claudio on the recognition of the 2020 American Dreamers Award. In fact, congratulations to all of the honorees here. This quartet is a very special quartet here to honor in this first virtual summit, this e-summit here from Huff. It is such a unique opportunity to engage each and every year with the American Dreamers, particularly this year, as small and medium-sized businesses have been so impacted by the public health measures taken to protect each other from this pandemic. Let's talk about that with our 4 awardees and remind our audience members, while normally we would be meeting face-to-face, you do still have the opportunity to ask questions. Please submit those questions through the Q&A feature on the bottom panel of the Zoom meeting here, and we will get to as many of those questions throughout the next several minutes during our conversation. So to each of you, to Billy, to Wendy, Dave, and Claudio, congratulations on this recognition. As I mentioned, a really important time. Billy, let me just start with you. How has business been impacted by the pandemic? Have you had to make any significant changes?
Well, good morning. First of all, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very happy to be here. And honestly, it's kind of rare for me to this new reality, talking to a screen. But anyway, my heart is with all you. Let me tell you, yes, of course, the pandemic pushed us to think different. But of course, gave us the opportunity to rethink our entrepreneurial journey. So as you mentioned, we have different verticals in our social business, which are housing, water, energy, and financial services. But not everything is bad with this pandemic. For example, in the water industry, we grew 300% during the pandemic, because we switched very quick our business model to e-commerce, and they gave us the opportunity to provide filters to every single family that try to have increase their health in their houses. And so and in the housing industry, we continue as we were considered as essential industry. We were one of the Fortune companies that consider essential, and so we were be able to continue our job. Fortunately for us, as an overall, as a group, we continue our journey during this pandemic, and of course, we hope that during the next couple of months, we finish our flip to be more adapted to the new reality.
We're going to have to hear more about that 300% growth in the water business during this pandemic, and how you've been able to swallow that and kind of move forward. Wendy and Dave, how about for you with Content Bacon? Wendy, we'll start with you. Any significant impact on the business?
So good morning, and thank you for having us, and congratulations to the other honorees here. So I think there's 3 areas. I guess we've been impacted, and luckily and very gratefully, somewhat positively. From an operations standpoint, we've always been a virtual company, so this was a little bit business as usual, and we thrive in this environment. So we've been able to actually support and help others kind of, get on the virtual bandwagon and figure out how to operate. So from that standpoint, it's been quite smooth. With our current customer base, we weren't sure really what to expect, and again, luckily, we were, very kind of stable. We were able to jump in and help customers with their communication in real time, which was slightly different from how we normally operate. And then we've also seen an increase in many companies out there who know and see now even more of the importance of telling their story powerfully through digital content. So we've seen a demand, which I feel a little bit bad, sometimes saying when so many other businesses are suffering, but that's again, we're very grateful for that.
Dave, how about from your perspective, any new opportunities maybe that the pandemic has brought to Content Bacon that previously weren't on your radar?
Yeah, I think so, and I'll second Wendy's comments about thank you for having us. Thank you for the honor. We're very grateful. Congrats to the other honorees as well. I think what's occurred for us opportunistically is what Wendy just touched on, in that it's been a little bit of an alarm clock, a warning of sorts for businesses out there who maybe have been sleeping on what they need to do to stay up to date, to stay current, to stay competitive in their market. Yeah, we've been able to take advantage of that. We're ready, and so because we're ready and our team is ready, we've been able to acquire some new business because of that.
Claudio, I think out of the 3 businesses represented with the Dreamer Awards, perhaps none of them had been impacted as directly by the public health measures that were put in place than yours. I believe you actually had to shut down your operations for a period of time. Is that right, Claudio?
Yes, that is correct. We actually were shut down officially for a full 5 weeks as a result of the governor's order in preservation of PPE, as we're a business that does utilize some PPE for the purposes of our laser services. So that was very challenging. We, employ about 53 people here, and we had to furlough 46 during that time period. And so anytime you have to do, even if it's a temporary termination, it's very challenging on a business, especially considering we had no idea as to a timeline as to when we could potentially reopen. There were some original county orders during the initial phase of the pandemic that tried to shut us down, that we actually fought by having our general counsel really look into the law. And I think that's a testament to all the entrepreneurs on this panel. Everyone's a fighter and really working toward the ongoing consistent success of their business, and not letting someone just, not taking no for an answer. And so we won against several of them, the city of Coral Gables, the city of Kendall, and we're able to keep our locations open against county orders originally. But then under the governor's order, we had no choice. At that point, we officially had to shut down all of our locations. And then we worked primarily toward just maintaining good communications with both staff while they were, on furlough, just informing them of everything that was happening and when we could potentially bringing them back, ask them when, to be ready, as well as constant ongoing communication via social media channels and email marketing to our customers, to let them know what's happening, to give them some comfort that we're still here, that it's, we're a safe business, and we're unfortunately just affected by this order. And then as soon as it's over, we were going to jump right back in and be able to serve them as we always have.
Yeah, Claudio, for so many budding entrepreneurs, it may be just trying to get the next client and trying to build that client to the second client and the third client. How did you find the wherewithal to go 5 weeks closed, no business, no income, no revenue? Costs went down considerably, certainly, but they didn't go away.
Right. So here's the unfortunate thing that I think people, it's like the earlier portion of this conversation with regard to always being prepared. You can't really prepare for a complete loss of total revenue. No matter what, I'm accruing payroll expenses in the prior month. And we're running payrolls of approximately $150,000 every 2 weeks. If I don't generate that $150,000 in the following month, that's a major hit, because I still have, this payroll still goes out even if I have to furlough the employees. I still have to pay them for the prior 2 weeks they worked, as well as all of the rent bills and things of that nature. So the only thing I can say is, having that never give up attitude, looking at every failure as an opportunity as to how can I survive rather than this is going to end me. I think, the only time businesses truly fail is when they finally give up. We went through the recession in 2008 with no additional capital, and we found a way to survive by just bootstrapping and really working hard and making deals and having extraordinarily transparent and open levels of communication with everyone involved, with calling our landlords and saying, hey, listen, this is what happened. You're not going to get a rent check this month, but we're not going anywhere. We're going to come up with something. Let's work out a way to pay this out over time. Same thing to our bank. We immediately called our banker and said, hey, listen, the laser financing deals that we have on our equipment, we need to find a way to, forego these payments until this order is lifted. What can we do? And we hit that immediately. As soon as the order came down, we started having those communications with everyone involved. And I think it's getting ahead of it helps tremendously. So for those of you involved, don't think that just because you have the bill means if you can't pay it, you're going under. There are always ways to negotiate. There are always time, you know, the landlord doesn't want to lose you either. They don't want an empty space or, you know, at a time when nobody's renting units. And it's the same with the, you know, the bank. The bank doesn't want to lose our business because they don't want to have to write off the loan either. They'd rather take a stalled payment than no payment ever. So I think it's important to understand you have options to try and center yourself and stay calm and recognize that, hey, you're going to get through it. Tell yourself and believe you're going to get through it. And then you start to look for opportunities as to how, as opposed to seeing just the tremendous weight and pressure of the moment at hand.
Claudio, you're speaking exactly to a question that we have from the audience about mindset. What's the mindset that helped make you successful? Billy, talk about that mindset that you have that allowed you to see the opportunity in your water business with the pandemic and capture this new and growing part of your entrepreneurship.
Yeah, thank you. In our case, we have very clear where to go. The only thing that we have to adjust is, you know, we have to take the wheel and just change for a little our mindset. We always have in mind that we need to grow, we need to help, and as Claudio said, we need to face it. We need to face the new reality. So we have to react very quick. This reaction allows us using the available information, and we create different scenarios. And we decided to follow the worst case scenario, and the worst case was the close of the physical retail, which actually happened. When we started to make this switch, we read the news about what was happening in China, and then so we create this scenario and say, okay, maybe this can happen in the US as well. We're not sure, but let's create this scenario. What if? And so we make the flip, and we reacted. We created a new platform. We put all this together, so we were able to like predict the future. That's what we did in the water business.
For Dave and Wendy, the second part of this question from the audience member asks about habits, and each of you, Wendy, particularly you, spoke about how Content Bacon and you were kind of already used to this remote work environment or distant work environment. What kind of habits can you help other entrepreneurs who are trying to get things fired up, and they had a scenario in February which was turned on its head, 3 weeks later, and continues to be the reality?
Yeah, one of the most instrumental things we do as a company that keeps us aligned and connected is we have a daily huddle every morning at 10:30 for about 7 minutes. And whether you're physically together or remote, it's such an amazing way to connect with your team, where we basically just go around very quickly and talk about big win from the previous day, number one focus for today, any area you're struggling, shout out to a member of the team and what you're grateful for. And that's just been instrumental for our team being all over. We have people in California, New York, North Carolina, Colorado, down here in South Florida, to stay connected. When COVID hit, we implemented one at the end of the day because our team, of course, was uncertain. There was fear surrounding. There were things happening with our customers in real time, and we wanted to stay connected. And so we added a more fun one at the end of the day, and people would bring their cocktails on and just unwind a little. And it was huge. It really, and we kept that in place for about 3 months. And then we're big advocates of tools and technology. So we use Slack all of the time. And again, those companies that struggle with, well, how do I know if my team's, getting things done? Having those kind of things in place, really help. And, we have all kinds of other processes and systems like scorecards and accountabilities. But those are the main ones. If there's one thing you take away, how to connect your team, a daily huddle is really life-changing, game-changing.
Dave, I can see you nodding your head there pretty vigorously. How scripted can those daily meetings be? I mean, 7 minutes is not a lot of time for a team that's spread out geographically for you.
Yeah, well, it's entirely scripted. It's that daily huddle. Those 4 or 5 categories of answers. That's it. That's the format. There's keep it tight to the point. It's not storytelling time. It's fact telling time. And so that's how that's how it is. And we've been doing it for probably since we started the company. I think I would have to say. Even when there was 2 of us, and then 3 of us, and then 4 of us. Now there's 10 or 11 of us, and we do it the same way. We've changed up the 3 or 4 or 5 things. We've done that, but it's still the same habit. You talk about habits. That is the habit, and that's Monday through Thursday, and then Friday we have a team meeting. That's a much longer meeting, and those are our habits, amongst others. But Wendy talked about habits of a team, and there's also the habits of the individual, habits of the entrepreneur, habits of the leader or leaders. And those are just as important, maybe more important, because how you show up will dictate how others show up. And so if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not having the habits for yourself on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times in the day, be it meditation or reading or whatever your habits are, if you don't have those in place, there is an impact.
Claudio, before the pandemic, one could manage by walking around. Difficult to do that when everybody's working remotely. Your business model does have physical space where people are congregating. Has that changed for you, even with social distancing, with masks, for instance, in your business, and kind of how you interact and manage those folks?
So our corporate office remained open during the entirety of the shutdown. However, our stores, we did have to make some accommodations. We always wear masks during treatments, which was fortunate. And we have, a lot of sanitation procedures because we are, in essence, a medical office. However, we did have to add limitations to the quantity of people in the office, move the furniture around to increase social distancing, all per the CDC guidelines. And then there's also a substantial comfort factor that you have to provide to clients who are now concerned. Not all, some clients don't care, and they were so excited when we called them and said, we're back open. They're like, I want to come in immediately. But we did offer phone consultations to accommodate those that were concerned, so that they could, be interested in the service, learn about it, and potentially buy it over the phone if they didn't feel comfortable yet coming in. We had to extend all of our contracts for the time that we were shut down for all of the clients to be able to come in and continue to receive services over time. So there's a lot of factors that we had to sort of meet as a result of the pandemic. But it's really about listening to the customer and understanding what their concerns are, meeting whatever the CDC guidelines are, but then being able to provide customers with the comfort they're looking for and reassuring them about all of the safety practices that we have in place here to provide that sort of level of confidence that they can come into our centers, feel safe, feel secure, know they can come in and out and without any harm done. So with regard to updating our treatment scheduling phone calls, that we had to ask them screening questions, have them come in and do temperature checks, et cetera. Anything that we could do both to make them feel more comfortable, but both to make the office appear to the degree that we're safer, as safe as possible for them to be, confident that they can get their services there. So that's a challenge, I think, given the pandemic. I'm sure we'll get over this and we'll all go back to, regular restaurant dining and shaking hands, at some point. But in the meantime, it's just really rolling with those punches and finding ways to accommodate, per the guidelines to make everybody comfortable.
You think we'll be back to kisses on the cheek when we say hello to each other in South Florida?
Listen, I know there's 2 sides of the fence to this pandemic, but effectively the data came out. If you're under 55, you have a 99.99% success rate as a result of even having exposure to COVID. I still meet people, we bump fists, we play golf together, we hang out. Our office doesn't really wear masks unless the person is totally concerned. They can wear their own mask. But I think people will eventually realize that this is, it will pass like anything else. I think one of the benefits of our business was surviving the recession in the first place, the first recession in 2008. I think it really helped us realize that when you're in it, you feel like it's forever. And that's something that all entrepreneurs need to understand. When you're going through a hard time, you feel like it is never going to end. That is just, that's the weight of the pressure that you feel. But it all ends. You're going to go through troughs, highs and lows in a business, no matter what. That's why there's so much stress, but that's also why the rewards are so fantastic. So I just advise people to just one day at a time, you know, I tell people a quick analogy. It's like getting punched in the face. If you were to walk out of your house every day and get punched in the face, by the fourth, fifth day, you know, you can dodge it like the Matrix because you're so used to this by now, you know. The action is still the same. The experience is still the same, but you're stronger. So I just tell people that even if it feels like the circumstance isn't changing, you're growing every day. You're becoming more hardened and capable. And over time, you're going to survive it. And you just have to have that faith.
Every storm runs out of rain.
Exactly. Every storm runs out of rain. Yeah. We had a question from the audience, Wendy, asking for what the questions are that Content Bacon asks in your daily huddle. You had mentioned them, but I'd like you to repeat those questions for us.
I think we're going to change it. Sorry, Wendy. I think we're going to change it to the Daily Hustle. I like that, Tom.
The Daily Hustle.
The Daily Hustle. Yeah.
I like that.
So it's,
I'm going to copyright that when we get off the Zoom call, though,
too
Dave.
Late,
so just careful.
Our team already did it. Too
Wendy.
late, Tom.
So it's big win from the last 24 hours. It's key focus for the day. It's any area where you're experiencing struggle and effort. A shout out to a member of the team for exemplifying one of our values, or just a shout out, and then something you're grateful for.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Billy, let me ask you, this idea of perseverance has come up as both a mindset and really a habit too. You're operating in real estate and affordable housing. You're operating in the environment, places where regulations can be pretty significant. What's your source of perseverance? What's your source of stick-to-itiveness that you've been able to rely upon?
Well, first of all, I'm convinced that success is a bad advisor. So once you achieve whatever you want to achieve, you have to continue fighting as if you are in the first round, you know. So very quick, our journey was, we started with houses, which is a very difficult way to start, especially in the bottom of the pyramid, providing houses to the rural families living in poverty, in hills and whatever. So at one point we figured out that our best value wasn't build the house by itself. The value was, our real value was that we were able to connect the wealth with the bottom of the pyramid. We were this kind of pipeline connecting the wealth and the bottom of the pyramid. So we decided to move forward to another industry, trying to prove this theory that we know how to connect rich and poor. And then we started the business of water, and then we tried to reply with the financial services. And so now I'm truly sure that our best value is that we speak poor and we can speak rich as well. So that way we can provide the best of both worlds. We can connect this wealth with the bottom of the pyramid. So that's our source of inspiration. We know that we can help a lot of people and making money, making this social impact and profits, living in balance.
Claudio, tell us a little bit about your journey to the laser centers that you've been able to build and grow and continue to grow, and how you kind of found yourself in this field, and why or how, as you reflect back, how you identify those opportunities.
You know, so I'll get into my story, but I think the general advice for all entrepreneurs is solve a problem. Effectively, if you can solve a problem, you're onto something. And if you can solve a problem that someone's willing to pay for, then you're onto something really good. I've had a lot of business ideas that didn't seem to have any path to making money, so I didn't pursue them. And so this one was very fortunate. I was in college. I had a business in college running nightclubs with my same business partner I have now. And then, we got tired of that business. So we decided to, go our separate ways. He worked in a cell phone distribution company, did very well. And I was about to get my master's in psychology. I'd applied, gotten into the program, but I worked out a lot. I'm very into fitness, always have been. And, I'm cursed by being Brazilian and Italian. Not that those, genetics are cursed, with the exception of body hair. And so I said to myself, how do I get, again, having that how-to attitude rather than that I can't afford it attitude. I said, how can I get laser hair removal? How can I get permanent hair removal? I can't shave my back. I'm not going to have my guy friends come over and shave my back. Like, it's not going to work, And so I decided that maybe if I got a job part-time at a hair removal place, I could get free services. So I called a few local offices, found one that was hiring. And I said, whatever job you're hiring for, if hair removal is a benefit, I'll take it. I took the job and realized after working there, I was like, man, this is a good model. And then sure enough, I was rapidly promoted. I became the sales consultant of the location. And people were constantly asking us about tattoo removal. And our practice that I was at wasn't offering it and refused to offer it. They were a franchise model. They were exclusively laser hair removal. And I said, man, this is a good model. We should start a business that does hair removal and tattoo removal and really corner in a new budding market. Tattoos were prevalent at the time. They're even more prevalent now. It's the 6th fastest growing segment of the American economy, is actually putting tattoos on. So I said to myself, this is an opportunity here. And with what I knew, I felt like it was another business that we could start. My business partner and I had no idea how we were going to get the capital or if we could ever even find an investor. So we just went to FAU every day and just did the work. We wrote a business plan. We met every day when neither of us was working and just continued to do the research off different centers, American Society of Plastic Surgery, get some data, get some numbers, put a business plan together, and then decided to, pitch anyone and everyone we knew. Anyone who I thought, I grew up poor, so did my business partner. And so we decided, let's just connect to anyone who may know someone who has money. We were in a fraternity in college, so we asked all our fraternity brothers if they knew anyone. And we were very fortunate. We pitched a restaurateur who pitched a friend of his in New York who flew down, and we did that pitch, and he was very excited about the business and decided to give us the capital to start that company. It was about 8 months after we had wrote our business plan, and we opened our first store and really grew organically from there. We had our ups and downs. We were shut down in our first 2 weeks, because we didn't have a fire door upstairs, things we didn't know as new budding business owners. But we were able to grow out of capital and continue growing and doubling the business in size basically every year until the recession. Then we shuffled through that for a while and then got back into growth, raised capital twice. We've raised capital from both a private placement memorandum as well as from a very large CEO of a private equity group out of New York. So we've gotten the experience of that, which is great. I don't recommend venture capital or private equity raising to anyone. Due diligence is not fun, but the partnership that we have and the group that we have to now help shuttle the business to grow is phenomenal. And you start to realize, like, as you grow, you start so small. I remember thinking numbers were so massive to me. We paid ourselves $400 a week. We drove every day from Boca to Coral Gables. We carpooled every day because we couldn't afford the gas to go back and forth every day. We worked literally 12-hour days every day from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., 6 days a week, that first, 2 years of the business before we started making any real money. But we had a vision. We believed in what we were doing, and it's paid off in droves from the commitment. But, it was a stumbled on opportunity. And so many things are like that. And too often we experience something and we go, you know what, that sucks. Well, if that thing you just experienced sucks, is there a way you can solve it? And if there is, you might be onto something. And that's the Bezos method for what can he sell that he can ship. Seattle had a lot of books in warehouses, so he picked books. He wasn't, I want to sell books for the rest of my life, and nor did I wake up one day and say, I'm going to be the laser king. Like, I want to do lasers. But, I fell into this bottle and it was rewarding and I love what I do. And therefore I've continued to stick with it. But I think too often people are looking for that perfect idea. I think you just got to solve a problem. And if it excites you enough to solve it and it's in a field you're generally interested in, you can win.
Billy referred to this in a little way about having to make a decision without all the information. Wendy, you and Dave worked in other companies and made the leap of faith into entrepreneurship. And again, that leap requires knowing what you know, but also knowing you're not going to have a complete picture of information, and you've just got to act. You have to move forward. Talk about that mindset when you and that journey that you and Dave have taken.
Yeah, so Dave and I both had previous companies. He had several. I had one previous company, and we met in an entrepreneurial program called EO Accelerator. And we were both looking for ways to scale our business without us having to work as hard. And we both saw, to Claudia's point, we both saw a problem that was out there. We saw companies struggling with how to tell their story. And so we weren't quite ready to leave our other businesses and do this 100%. So initially we started it, a little bit in beta mode, and we were able to validate it. And then there was a certain point, I remember the day where, we both agreed that this was the thing that we wanted to do 100%, and that this was what we were going to do 100%. And I think, again, to Claudia's point, you just kind of one step at a time, one day at a time. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, we're risk takers. We kind of thrive on that. I thrive on the unknown. I thrive on being uncomfortable. And so that works for me. That's not everyone's personality, but for me, it definitely is. I'm very risk tolerant. So it excites me to, go into the unknown and not quite know how it's going to turn out, yet know it's going to turn out okay. And I think that's, goes back to that mindset. I always know everything is going to work out. I always know that.
Dave, drawing upon your previous entrepreneurial activities, what were the lessons drawn from those that you've been able to apply with Wendy and Content Bacon? And also a question from the audience about how do you know when you've got the right idea? As you've done entrepreneurship before, Dave, how do you know this one's the one where I'm going to put my efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer to that is you don't know. I think there's some businesses where you can know that, but I think there's a lot where you don't, and you don't know it until you get someone to buy something. It's not a real business until someone pays you. Claudio didn't know people were going to show up at the center until they showed up. And so same with us. We didn't know anyone would buy until they did. But I think, the lessons are, entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. It takes some intestinal fortitude to really be all in. And the lessons are, you got to just keep moving. You use the word hustle, and I use that word a lot, with myself. It's like, you have to hustle, and not in the negative connotation. I mean, in the run to first base connotation, and keep going. That's that kind of hustle. And so it's one day at a time. It's one action at a time. It's one goal at a time, but you can't stop moving. You just can't stop.
We've got several questions in the Q&A queue, and reminding our Zoom audience to use that question and answer button there with the Zoom machine and submit questions. We've got about 10 minutes left here with these American Dreamers if you have questions. Billy, this question comes up every year that I've had the good luck to hold these conversations with American Dreamers. And it's this: what do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Well, the best answer that comes into my mind is that everything is possible. You just have to do it. You just have to put your hands on the work. So whatever you can imagine, whatever you can dream, it's possible to do it. You just have to work hard, and you just have to make it happen. So if your dreams don't scare you, they aren't big enough.
If your dreams don't scare you, they're not big enough. Wendy, that sounds like something that could come up tomorrow in the morning meeting.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Let's talk about dealing with failure a little bit. Some of that perseverance has come up here. Dave, maybe if you can tell us a little bit about, where a journey took you on an off ramp and it turned into a dead end, but how you were able to maneuver in a way to turn it into an asset.
I can't remember any of them, so I can't answer you. I mean, that's
that therapy has worked for you then, Dave.
Well, I think that's the entrepreneur mentality. You know, it's if you remembered them all, if you held on to them all, you'd never do anything again in entrepreneurship. But I think the one that comes to mind is, you know, we've been since we started the business, the vision was to have our own platform, our own software, if you will, to manage the experience internally for our team and manage the experience for our customers. And we're on our third go around of building that software. So the first two go arounds were failures on some level, but learning experiences on another. So they weren't entirely, you know, they bore some kind of fruit. But you just, you know, if you have a vision for something and you have conviction, you know, do it again. You know, it's just like, it's all the old adages we heard as children. You fall off the bike, fall off the horse, you get back on again. It's not anything more than that.
Yeah. Claudia, let me ask you, as you've grown your business, how did you approach some decisions about spending your time as an entrepreneur, as an operator, as a fundraiser, as a strategist, as you've had to kind of maneuver and grow your portfolio of skills? How have you, you know, relinquished control in some degree and taken on additional responsibilities in others?
So I love this portion, because I think, you know, when you get back to what do you wish you knew then that you knew now, this is a fundamental element. You have to work on your business, not in your business. When you are the entrepreneur and the leader, your goal is growth and strategy and doing the things that are going to move the needle fivefold, tenfold. It's not the grassroots day-to-day stuff that keeps the business afloat. Now, in the beginning, you're doing all roles. Acknowledge that. Everybody's got to do that. But as soon as you're able to extricate yourself from every day-to-day operational role, you should. Our business grew exponentially more rapidly as soon as my business partner and I decided we're no longer making collective decisions about everything. He's going to run day-to-day operations, and I'm going to be a growth strategist and do what I do best, which is work with investors, look at long-term plans, negotiate big deals, do the things I need to do to get us additional assets, laser equipment, service offerings, etc. Develop the brand and think all day long about how I can take us to the next step, the next step, the next step more rapidly. When we did that, things exponentially grew. Because now my time, instead of doing day-to-day things that I could hire someone likely better than me to do, I could focus on the major impact, which is raising capital, opening 50 stores, doing the things that are going to grow this business into an entity that's really going to be a success based on the level of our aspirations. If you're someone who just wants to own a job effectively, you know, Robert Kiyosaki says it in his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you know, most entrepreneurs own a job. If that's what you want, that's great. You know, I applaud you, you know, own your own business so that you're your own boss all day long. But if you want to own an entity, a scalable, sellable business, then you have to get yourself out of it. Someone has to be able to say, hey, this business can run without you. And that brings the value. And that's how you have that reward. And also just the acknowledgement of timing. So I think another lesson that people need to acknowledge is raise money when you don't need it. You know, save money when you don't think you need to. Those lessons are just wonderful. You know, we were on such a trajectory for such a long time that, you know, we probably could have sold the business in 2008 for what we could have sold the business for, you know, almost 8 years later because of where we were back then. And we were short-sighted. Now, it would have been nice to go through the recession with many millions of dollars in the bank account, as opposed to going through the recession with none of it and scrambling to survive, you know, because when things are good, you think it's always going to be good. When things are bad, you think it's always going to be bad. So I just think it's important that when we first started our company, we were never the managers. We trained the managers, we sat with the managers, but we hired managers from day one because we knew if we were doing that job, we weren't growing. We weren't opening a second store. We weren't spending our time evaluating what's next. We were doing the day-to-day operations. And then you get lost in day-to-day operations. You never see, you know, the forest for the trees. And so I think that's just very important. If you want to grow something, find ways to do that, to extricate yourself from each role, and do it as you can. Do it as sales come in and you can afford it. Little by little, hire someone to do those roles so you can get to the position where you're doing what I'm doing now, which is effectively investor relations and growth strategy. That's the sole role of my job.
Such an important part here, because the research has shown Miami, South Florida, very strong in entrepreneurship and startup, very weak in scale up. Lots of reasons for that. Billy, you've worked with Endeavor, which is one of the groups that has been focused on entrepreneurship, startup, as well as scale up. Respond to kind of what you're hearing from Claudio and how that has applied, Billy, to your operations and some of the decisions you've been able to make and successfully make.
Yeah, but absolutely. I am a truly believer in a scale up. And one of the things I am trying to prove is that even you are a social company, you can scale up as well. Actually, I'm finishing my second book, which is called Social Scale Up, Why Not? Because I really think that if you want to make the difference, you have to grow. You have to think big. So go big or go home.
If your dreams aren't big enough, if your dreams aren't scaring you, they're not big enough, I think was among the many takeaways here. Wendy, you started with your journey talking about creating an opportunity that was scalable. And I think this is a great place to end our conversation for Dreamers. Talk about the decisions you and Dave have made to achieve that scalability, to work toward that scalability that you've envisioned for so long.
Absolutely. So one of the first decisions that we made when we started this company is we weren't going to get sucked into doing all of the roles ourselves. So hiring a team before we thought we were ready, like making that jump so that we could spend our time on the things that were going to have more of a direct impact on the business. So that's been key. And then really figuring out what lane we were going to operate in. I think Dave and I both experienced in our previous businesses, saying yes to a lot of things, like, being opportunistic, hustling a lot from that perspective. And now we say no to a lot of things. Like, we're very clear on what we do and what we don't do. And, saying no can be so scary when you need the cash flow, when you need to make payroll, when you need to pay rent. But the more you do that and stick to what you're really good at and where you want to focus, the more you grow. The simpler things get, the bigger they grow. And so, and it's not a straight line of doing that. We fall back into, our old habits of wanting to say yes to things and take on things. And luckily, having a partner where we can kind of keep each other in check. But actually our team does a very good job of doing that for us now. So that's kind of the true sign of when what you're saying is starting to make an impact, when your team feeds it back to you, and they really are the ones that keep us in check today, which I'm so grateful for. So those have been some of the ways.
Well, another virtual round of applause for the 2020 American Dreamers, Billy Jaime, Wendy Lieber, Dave Custon, and Claudio Sorrentino. Congratulations to each of you. Well-deserved recognition. And I really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for making me part of it.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom.
Eduardo, we'll throw it back to you, Eduardo. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you for your insightful questions and engagement with our American Dreamer awardees. And congratulations as well to our American Dreamer awardees. And thank you again to our American Dreamer Awards sponsor, JM Family Enterprises and the Southeast Toyota Distributors. Now we'll ask our awardees for their final thoughts and closing remarks from our sponsor. And we'll start with Wendy.
Well, again, thank you. This was a great conversation. I loved learning from the other awardees, and we're here for anything and everything. So any of you listening now or whenever, if you want to reach out, feel free to reach out to Dave or I. We love to support other entrepreneurs, and I'm just so grateful that we got to be part of this. So thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Dave, final thoughts?
Yeah, similarly, lots of gratitude for the honor and being a part of the conversation. My parting thoughts or words to whoever is listening or needs to hear them is don't stop. If you have designs on launching a business, scaling a business, growing a business, or even creating a job for yourself, the way Claudio described it, it's all very noble. And my advice is to not stop. Keep going.
Thank you, Dave. And Billy, do you have any final thoughts?
Sure. Well, it's for the audience. Being an entrepreneur is a blessing. It's a lifestyle. So even you don't know or you don't notice somebody's watching. Somebody's watching you. So lead by example. Always lead by example. Just keep in mind that for a good entrepreneur, the heaven is more blue and the hell is more red. So work hard, because being an entrepreneur is challenging, but it's a blessing.
Thank you, Billy. And Claudio, last but not least, final thoughts?
Yeah, to second what Billy said, as Elon Musk said, entrepreneurship is like staring to the abyss while eating glass. It can be extremely challenging, but I just think that everyone on this panel and everyone who's aspiring to be an entrepreneur needs to understand, to Billy's point, how much of a social impact you already make just by employing a single person. It's not even necessarily great if you're very successful and you can do a lot and be charitable and be wonderful. That's phenomenal. But just by employing a single person, you're putting food on someone's table and helping them feed their family because you were inspired to do something that you desire to do. And that alone is tremendous. And it's not just the impact you have with that one person, but every dollar that you pay that person that they then spend somewhere else impacts another family and employs another person and keeps another life coming home successfully to food on the table. So your dreams support the dreams and futures of so many around you that I just think entrepreneurship should be lauded so much more than it is, and people should be rewarded. And so I'm so grateful to this organization for recognizing us for the work we do, because there's such an impact that we make on the lives around us that I go to sleep every night proud of the amount of people we employ and what we've done for their lives. And everyone on this panel and every aspiring entrepreneur should do the same. It's truly commendable, and we truly do move the economy and keep people, able to eat and healthy. And I applaud all of you.
Thank you again for your inspiring thoughts. Every year that I'm in these ceremonies and awards, I always find myself so inspired by hearing your stories of how you overcame, challenges and how you are all successful and inspiring others to do the same. So again, I thank you. And now I'll turn it over to our sponsor, John Guerrero from the JM Family Enterprises, for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, that was a terrific discussion, guys. I really appreciated Billy, Wendy, Dave, and Claudio. Thank you for sharing your stories. It was awesome, and for being an inspiration to our participants. And we certainly wish you continued success. So thank you, guys. And Tom, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us again. Moving on, we invite you to check out the virtual exhibit hall at 11:30. Our next workshop will take place in Spanish, Crisis Marketing 101, lessons from COVID-19 pandemic and more, Mercadeo en Tiempos de Crisis 101, Lecciones que deja la pandemia de COVID-19 y más. And don't forget to join our next Wednesday, August 26th, for another round of information, connection, and inspiration. Thank you.
Muy buenos días y gracias por acompañarnos esta mañana. Mi nombre es Eduardo Pineda y yo soy su moderador para la sesión del día de hoy en la Cumbre de Empresarios de 2020. Este año es el 9º e-Summit anual y es nuestro primer año trayendo este evento de una manera virtual. Así, estamos increíblemente emocionados y esperamos que ustedes también lo estén. En pocos minutos oirán a nuestro patrocinador del taller y a nuestros panelistas. Además de proveer una variedad de servicios a la comunidad, Hispanic Unity también se encuentra profundamente involucrado en el compromiso civil. Y hay dos maneras muy importantes en las que ustedes pueden involucrarse en su comunidad este año: respondiendo el censo y votando en las elecciones. Así que los animamos a que completen ambas cosas, el censo y expresen su voto. Los dueños de pequeños negocios en Broward pueden ayudar a nuestro condado que sea contado al otorgar 15 minutos para que sus empleados completen el censo. Para más información o recursos adicionales sobre el censo, por favor envíenle un correo electrónico a Otto Valenzuela. Ustedes pueden ver el email de Otto en la pantalla. Él es nuestro experto en el censo y tiene todos los recursos para su negocio y para sus empleados. También las próximas elecciones se llevarán a cabo el martes 3 de noviembre del 2020. Y la fecha límite para registrarse para votar es el 5 de octubre. Así que visite becomeavoter.org para que se registre y se asegure de que su voz y su voto también sean escuchados. Antes de empezar, algunas cosas que debemos de tener en cuenta. Usted podría realizar preguntas a través de la opción del Q&A que se encuentra en su panel del control de Zoom. Seleccionaremos preguntas y serán respondidas en vivo por nuestros invitados o serán respuestas de manera escrita para que otros asistentes también puedan leerlas. De esta manera, si le respondemos de una manera escrita, se va a poder ver su pregunta y también nuestra respuesta a los demás asistentes. Este webinar está siendo grabado y en 24 horas usted recibirá un enlace a esta grabación, así que podrá ver el evento. De esta misma forma también recibirá una encuesta. Por favor, complete la encuesta para que comparta su experiencia y nos pueda ayudar a mejorar para nuestros próximos eventos. Por último, le pedimos por favor que silencie su micrófono cuando no esté hablando y por favor silencien sus teléfonos y dispositivos electrónicos. Y ahora con ustedes, la representante de nuestro patrocinador del taller, Maguana Jean, de Wood Forest National Bank.
Muchas gracias. Bienvenidos a la 9ª Cumbre de Emprendedores deja. Mi nombre es Maguana Jean y estoy aquí por parte de Wood Forest National Bank. Nos sentimos honrados de tenerlos todos hoy aquí y de patrocinar el taller número 6, Mercadeo en tiempos de crisis 101, lecciones que deja la pandemia de COVID y más. En Wood Forest National Bank queremos que su negocio crezca y prospere, de cuentas corrientes a servicios de cuentas comerciales, de préstamos empresariales a banca en línea. Nuestros productos y servicios están diseñados teniendo su empresa en mente. Para aprender más sobre nuestros servicios de banca pequeño negocios, visiten woodforest.com/smallbusiness. El propósito de la sesión de hoy es asegurarnos de que ustedes se informen, se conecten y se inspiren. Con eso, nuestras panelistas de hoy son la señora Leslie Cataya Franco, directora de cuentas de O'Connell y Goldberg Public Relations, y la señora Aileen Izquierdo, instructoras y directoras graduadas del programa de maestría de comunicaciones estratégicas y globales de FIU. Leslie y Aileen, es un placer tenerlas hoy aquí. Gracias.
No te oigo, perdón, pero creo que tienes el micrófono en mute.
Sí.
Perdón. Ok. Maguana, perdón, disculpa. Gracias por presentar a nuestras panelistas, Maguana. Muy amable. Y otra vez, Leslie y Eileen, un gusto estar con ustedes de nuevo. Estuvimos hace unas horas en la presentación en inglés. Ahora estamos en nuestro workshop en español. Quería empezar por la primera pregunta. ¿Pueden compartir con nosotros ustedes algunos ejemplos de las mejores comunicaciones de mercadeo en estos tiempos de crisis que hayan visto por parte de una pequeña empresa? Y para nuestra audiencia, ¿podrían definir qué es una crisis y cuáles son los diferentes tipos de crisis que hay? Y de pronto nos podrían hacer una referencia a ejemplos que ilustren la manera en que una empresa puede responder a los diferentes tipos de crisis que estamos viviendo.
Por supuesto. Y vamos a empezar primero con los diferentes formas de crisis que uno puede tener en una empresa. El primero es un desastre natural, que son huracanes, tornados, si un árbol cae encima de la tienda. Esa es una forma, y cómo comunicas con ese desastre o esa crisis es muy diferente de las otras. En comparación, hay otras formas de crisis como uno de negocio, que puede ser, si el CEO hace algo mal o si hay información de sus clientes, alguien se lo robaron digitalmente. Eso es otra forma. La tercera es de policía. Bueno, no, de policía no, pero más de como el gobierno, ¿verdad? Estamos ahora en el año de vamos a elegir a un nuevo presidente y hay muchos temas ahora en el envío y en la media de, por ejemplo, los estudiantes de DACA o de los impresos que vienen internacionales. Y eso también puede ser una crisis por una empresa. Y en la forma de comunicar en los tres diferentes son totalmente diferentes, porque un desastre puede ser, el tiempo de un desastre, el tiempo de un huracán puede ser de 2 o 3 días. Y esa crisis pasa rapidito. Con una crisis del gobierno o de algo las leyes, ese puede demorar unos meses, 2 meses, 3 meses. Ahora estamos en el medio de una pandemia y el pensamiento en marzo fue que iba a ser unas cuantas semanas, un mes en total, pero aquí estamos llegando a 6 meses, 7 meses de estarnos en el medio de esta pandemia. Entonces, esta crisis y comunicar en esta crisis es totalmente diferente. Cuando estamos hablando de diferentes ejemplos, que a mí me encanta a encontrar ejemplos de empresas que son más pequeñitas, es un poquito difícil, porque las formas que usan un empresa que es pequeño es diferente que una más grande, pero en mirar lo que están haciendo las compañías más grandes, el Fortune 500, podemos llevar y coger unas ideas de lo que ellos están haciendo. Por ejemplo, a mí me encanta lo que hicieron IKEA. Hicieron una comercial y hicieron una campaña entera que se llama Yo quedo en mi casa. Hicieron videos en YouTube, hicieron comerciales, tenían una campaña entera en social media, lo cual le estaba mandando el mensaje que estamos unidos, tenemos que quedar en casa porque eso es lo mejor para su familia y para la comunidad. Entonces, en el medio de esta pandemia, están metiendo en el mensaje universal en vez de tratar de vender cosas. Tanto como hizo Ford, porque Ford hicieron una campaña que se dice Built to Lend a Hand. Y en esa campaña le estaba diciendo a la comunidad y también a las personas que compran Fords que mira, vamos a convertir nuestras factorias y vamos a hacer PPE, vamos a hacer ventiladores, vamos a hacer máscaras por la gente que están trabajando en el medio de coronavirus, que los doctores, las enfermeras que están en los hospitales. Y en eso, diciendo, mira, estamos unidos también, el mismo mensaje. El otro que a mí me gusta también es CVS. CVS es totalmente diferente a Kia y Ford, porque Kia y Ford son compañías que están vendiendo algo. CVS tiene como, y su carácter de la compañía es totalmente diferente. CVS es una compañía, sí están vendiendo cosas, pero están vendiendo cosas que te ayudan tu salud. Entonces, lo que hicieron ellos es, en vez de hacer un mensaje que era algo internacional, como me quedo en casa o estamos aquí unidos con ustedes, como hicieron videos y hicieron una campaña con diferentes doctores, mandando información y respondiendo a preguntas de sus clientes, las personas que vienen a sus tiendas para comprar Mucinex y comprar cosas a través del coronavirus, ¿no? Entonces, tenía un doctor que estaba diciendo, mira, este coronavirus, aquí te puedes hacer el test, allá están las cosas que necesiten, y era otro mensaje completamente diferente, que era más por su industria y lo que hacen CVS.
Gracias, Leslie. Aileen, ¿tú podrías contestar esta pregunta?
No, claro, y gracias de nuevo por tenernos aquí hoy. Solamente agregándole un poquito lo que estaba diciendo Leslie, claro, crisis son diferentes, pero una cosa universal de todas las crisis es que básicamente es un momento de dificultad o de desafío que requiere una respuesta coordinada. Y yo creo que eso es una de las partes más importantes de lo que estamos viendo en estos momentos, que en vez de, bueno, es una campaña o es un comercial o es una imagen que se está poniendo en las redes sociales, que las personas y los negocios que han sido más coordinados son los que están recibiendo el mayor apoyo. Entonces, la idea de que están mirando esta pandemia como ejemplo, como algo que no dura un día, que no dura 2 días, que es algo que estamos aquí a largo plazo, y entonces los mensajes que son necesarios para los clientes, para los empleados, para todas las personas que tienen algo que ver con esa compañía o con ese negocio, que están haciendo un mensaje y están dando información coordinada. Entonces, igual cuando es algo pequeño, cuando es un huracán, es necesario hacer mensajes también coordinados para que todo el mundo sepa lo que se puede esperar de un negocio que a lo mejor vaya a cerrar, que cuando vaya a volver a abrir. Y cuando es un problema de una organización, un poquito diferente, claro, que en lo que estamos lidiando ahora, como lo que está pasando en estos momentos con el Ellen DeGeneres Show, la idea de que la información también tiene que ser coordinada, tiene que ser honesta, que tiene que ser algo que al final del día la persona que está recibiendo ese mensaje entienda lo que está pasando, entienda lo que está tratando de hacer la organización en tratar de resolver el problema o de, en estos momentos con la pandemia, de nuevo, manejar este problema y esta crisis, que es algo diferente, algo que nunca se ha visto en los negocios y en el mundo en que estamos, ¿no?
Claro que sí. Muchas gracias, Aileen y Leslie. Ahora, les recuerdo a todos, por favor, si tienen alguna pregunta, por favor envíenla por medio del Q&A feature en su control panel de Zoom. Ahora pasamos a nuestro próximo punto de discusión. La pregunta es, como un propietario de un negocio, ¿qué pasos debo yo de tomar antes de una crisis para estar listo para comunicarme con mis grupos de interés claves o de key stakeholders que decimos? Entonces, ¿qué pasos debo de tomar antes de una crisis para estar listo, para comunicarme con las personas claves?
Bueno, creo que una de las tácticas claves que un propietario debe de tener en su negocio es, hay que establecer esa relación con clientes, con sus empleados desde el empezar. No cuando estamos en el momento, en el furor, en el calor de una crisis, o ahora tengo que establecer una relación. No, la relación hay que tenerla desde el empezar. Cuando uno está empezando su negocio, cuando está empezando la idea de un negocio, ¿cómo es que voy a tener esta relación? ¿Cómo es que me voy a poder comunicar con las personas que me van a ayudar a mí y que yo voy a poder ayudar? Todo lo más básico, ¿no? Dependiendo del negocio, los nombres, los teléfonos, los correos electrónicos de un cliente, claro, de sus empleados. A lo mejor, dependiendo también en el negocio, a lo mejor es apropiado tener la información en las redes sociales en que aparecen sus clientes, las personas que a lo mejor pueden dar un poquito de influencia sobre ese negocio. Pero es el trabajo básico que hay que hacer desde el empezar. No es que yo voy a abrir mis puertas y aquí van a entrar extranjeros, van a comprar lo que yo tenga y se van a ir, o van a usar mis servicios y se van a ir. Esa relación hay que establecerla. Todo lo que nosotros hacemos en el mundo de la comunicación empieza con relaciones con la prensa, relaciones con los empleados, relaciones con las personas que están oyendo estos mensajes. Eso es clave y lo más importante, en opinión mía, de lo que tiene que hacer alguien que tenga un negocio, alguien que esté trabajando para una compañía.
Siguiendo eso también, lo que yo pienso es cuando estás pensando de la comunicación y de esas relaciones, tiene que como pensar de las diferentes audiencias que te vas a tener, ¿verdad? Porque primero tienes su empleo, si tienes que comunicar con los empleos también. Si tienes una empresa, lo cual tiene una cadena de suministro, también tienes que comunicar con esas compañías, porque esas compañías dependen en sus negocios para ellos. Tienes los clientes que vienen y también tiene la comunidad y tiene que comunicar con la comunidad. Encima de eso, tiene administraciones regulatorias como, por ejemplo, estoy pensando en el aeropuerto, ¿no? Tiene el FAA. Si hay un crisis en el aeropuerto, también tiene que mandar mensajes, mandar comunicaciones a esa administración. Ahora con la pandemia tienes otra parte también, que es el gobierno, el condado, el estado y también nacional, lo cual están mandando y demandando a negocios lo que puedes hacer, si tiene que cerrar a un tiempo, si están diciendo ahora que no puedes tener más que 10 personas juntos en un evento o en el restaurante, o tienen que servir fuera del restaurante afuera. Esas son también cosas que tiene que pensar, si tiene que mandar mensaje también al gobierno. Lo que yo siempre digo es, no puedes esperar hasta el crisis para preparar para el crisis. Tiene que preparar ahora, tiene que preparar primero y tiene que pensar en los diferentes crisis que pueden afectar a su negocio. Vivimos en la Florida. Tener un plan para un huracán tiene que estar parte de su comunicación anualmente. Si viene un huracán o si no viene un huracán. Lo que yo siempre digo a mis clientes es, tiene que empezar, pero a lo principio, y también tiene que hacer lo que puedes hacer ahora, porque cuando venga esa crisis, no vas a tener el tiempo a sentar y a pensar y a hacer las estrategias que quieres hacer en ese momento. Entonces, si puedes hacer los mensajes primero y tenerlo al lado, entonces cuando venga esa crisis, lo único que necesitas hacer es cambiar unas palabras aquí y allá y se va, ¡pum! Se va. También siempre me doy el consejo que tiene que tener esa información, la información de sus clientes, los emails, los números de teléfono de sus empleos, las diferentes audiencias, lo cual tiene que mandar mensajes, los mensajes que tienen al lado. Pone todo en diferentes lugares. Tráigalo en un flash drive, ponlo en Dropbox, guárdalo en un, estoy perdiendo la palabra, external hard drive. Porque si va la luz, si va teléfono, si va internet, tiene que accesar esa información, tiene que tener esa información rapidito.
Es correcto. Y eso que acabas de decir del external hard drive es una buena pauta para la pregunta que viene de nuestra audiencia. En este momento vamos a tomar una pausa para responder una pregunta de nuestra audiencia. Y les recuerdo que pueden poner sus preguntas en el Q&A feature de Zoom. So, la pregunta, hablando del external hard drive y otras cosas así, la pregunta es, ¿cuáles son algunas inversiones estratégicas en software o marketing durante una crisis? So, de pronto una inversión estratégica es definitivamente tener un external hard drive donde tengas toda la información importante de tus clientes y demás en un external hard drive. ¿Qué otra inversión estratégica en software o en marketing ¿cuáles son algunas de estas inversiones que se pueden hacer estratégicamente en software o algo más durante una crisis?
Hay miles. Si te vas en Google y te pones inversiones o aplicaciones para marketing, sale miles y miles y miles y miles de aplicaciones. Lo bueno de eso es que hay muchas aplicaciones que son gratis, que le pueden poner en la computadora o usarlo a través del cloud, que son total gratis. Lo que yo siempre le digo es, en el medio de una crisis, tiene que tener diferentes canales para comunicar. Entonces, si estás usando email, MailChimp es buenísimo. Si estás usando la media social, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, hay diferentes aplicaciones donde te puedes poner todos los canales sociales en el medio y mandar un mensaje una vez y van a las 3 diferentes plataformas. Eso es otra que es muy buena. También yo siempre uso Dropbox porque en Dropbox la puedo conseguir desde mi computadora, desde el teléfono, desde el iPad. Yo puedo obtener los documentos que me necesito, videos, fotos, todo lo que necesito está allí todo el tiempo. Y eso es mucho más barato de tener un FTP o VPN o un acceso remoto a las computadoras que están en tu negocio.
Gracias, Leslie. Aileen, ¿cuáles son algunas de las inversiones más efectivas?
No, claro. Y lo que yo voy a recomendar algunas veces, especialmente cuando yo hablo con mis estudiantes y cuando hablaba con personas que trabajaban conmigo, algunas veces le causaba un poquito de sorpresa, pero toda esa información, muy importante información que uno puede tener en la nube y que la debe de tener en la computadora y que la debe de tener en un external hard drive y que la debe de tener en varios lugares, también la deben de tener en papel. Que yo sé que eso le causa a algunas personas un poquito de, ¿cómo que hay que imprimir algo? Tengo que tener papel, ¿por qué no voy a querer papel? Porque muchas veces en una crisis, a lo mejor en la situación mía, a lo mejor yo no tengo internet y yo no tengo electricidad y yo no tengo teléfono, pero si voy a casa de mi mamá, ella sí. Pero si no tengo la manera de conectar ciertas cosas, a lo mejor no tengo acceso al teléfono súper importante de alguien que yo necesitaba porque el teléfono mío no tiene batería ya. o el email, de verdad que necesitaba el email o el direct message handle de alguien en Twitter, no lo tengo. Pero si lo tengo escrito en un papel, en un notebook, nosotros hacíamos unos binders, básicamente, donde toda esa información estaba, y entonces todos los años o cada 6 meses uno entraba, si teníamos que hacer cambios, hacíamos cambios. Y siempre le causaba un poquito de sorpresa a las personas, pero yo siempre decía, ten eso y tengo en el carro o en la maleta o algo donde si fuera necesario uno lo puede sacar y de ahí podemos empezar de nuevo si tuviera que hacer la situación. Entonces no es software y no es hardware y no es nada tecnológico, no es nada muy fancy ni nada de eso, pero es algo que funciona. Y algunas veces tener un lápiz, un pedazo de papel es todo lo que se necesita para salir de un momento de crisis y poder salir adelante.
Es verdad, Elina, hay veces que un papel y un lápiz es suficiente, y yo todavía soy de los que me gusta escribir todo en un cuaderno. Siento que entra mejor en mi cerebro y se queda ahí para siempre, a diferencia de si lo pongo en otro lugar. Muchas gracias. Ahora voy a pasar con la siguiente pregunta. Aileen, empecemos contigo. ¿Cuáles son aquellos mensajes claves para comunicarnos con clientes y clientes potenciales también, antes, durante y después de una crisis? ¿Cuáles son aquellos mensajes claves?
Bueno, me gustaría decir que estos son, que es A, B y C, pero no existe una fórmula que dicta los mensajes que se tienen que promover antes, durante y después de una crisis. Pero lo que yo creo que es muy importante, lo que debe suceder, independientemente de lo que sea la situación, es que el liderazgo de esa organización, de ese negocio, debe de rápidamente afrontar el problema, lo que sea el problema. Si es la pandemia, es la pandemia. Si es otra situación, es otra situación. Debe de ser honesto en su respuesta, claro en lo que se hará para solucionar la situación y ver si puede en esos momentos dar un poquito más de información a lo que se va a hacer para evitar que algo como eso vuelva a pasar. Y creo que también, y es difícil uno ponerse en esa situación, pero si la organización no está segura de cuáles pudieran ser esos próximos pasos, es importante decir, no estamos seguros lo que van a ser esos próximos pasos. De nuevo, en esta pandemia estamos en esa situación que no estamos muy claros en lo que va a pasar mañana o en una semana o en 2 semanas y cuándo uno va a poder abrir sus puertas como antes. A lo mejor nunca va a ser como antes o el resto de este año no va a ser como antes. Y cuando cambia el toque de queda en el condado y cuando ese toque de queda es diferente que el toque de queda en su ciudad. Y si yo tengo clientes que están en otra parte del sur de la Florida que a lo mejor no tienen toque de queda, toda esa información puede causar confusión, puede causar frustración. Y en esas situaciones yo creo que es bien importante que el liderazgo de nuevo explique, estamos haciendo esto porque hay toque de queda hoy. Y cuando cambie, entonces, ok, cambió el toque de queda, entonces nosotros estamos haciendo algo diferente mañana. Y también tenemos que entender que a lo mejor las personas que vienen a trabajar para nosotros o entran por las puertas de nuestro negocio si está abierto, están frustrados, están confundidos, están cansados. Y tenemos que tener esa paciencia con ellos, tenemos que tener esos buenos sentimientos, entendiendo que ellos están pasando por momentos dificultosos iguales que nosotros. Hay que recordarse que somos todos humanos y que todos estamos pasando por estas situaciones que nunca hemos pasado. No hay un libro de reglas que digan esto es lo que va a pasar y esto es lo que tiene que hacer. Tenemos que ser flexibles, tenemos que tener paciencia y nos tenemos que portar bien con nuestros clientes, con nuestros empleados. Tenemos que ser buenas personas, buenos humanos, especialmente en estos momentos. So, no hay una fórmula que diga estos son los mensajes, pero sí, de nuevo, la honestidad creo que es lo más importante y explicarle a esas personas que están recibiendo esos mensajes por qué cosas estamos haciendo esto y no esto, por qué cosas estamos cerrando más temprano en vez de antes, por qué cosas no tenemos accesible los productos que uno quiere. Creo que eso es bien importante.
Gracias.
Estoy completamente de acuerdo. Ser honesto y transparente son lo más importante de cualquier comunicación que te vas a mandar a los clientes, los empleados y la comunidad en total. Mira, y la población internacional del mundo entero están ahora en el medio de una pandemia donde cada día todo cambia, tienen que escuchar, mirar y leer información que cambia minuto a minuto a minuto de escuelas, cuando los niños van a regresar a la escuela, de los casos de la pandemia en su área y del estado o nacionalmente, de qué vas a pasar con las pruebas y los exámenes de COVID y dónde los pueden conseguir. El día entero está lleno de información. Entonces, tiene que estar honesto y transparente en lo que está pasando con su negocio para que sus clientes y la comunidad no pierdan ese mensaje, primero. Segundo, tener compasión y empatía, eso no es algo pasivo, eso es algo activo. No es solamente a decir, estamos contigo, estamos unidos en esto, estamos con ustedes, por favor mantenga paciencia con nosotros. Es también a vivir ese mensaje y encontrar maneras y formas de poner ese mensaje en vivo en las acciones que están haciendo como un negocio. Por ejemplo, si tú ves un negocio y tienes un restaurante y estás ordenando comida, primero eso ayuda a las compañías que mandan comida a ti, pero si no estás vendiendo toda esa comida porque no tiene el volumen de clientes que está viniendo a tu restaurante, puedes mandar y donar esa comida a una iglesia o a un programa que está mandando esa comida a gente que ahora no tienen dinero para comprar comida o están o que tiene el miedo de perder ese dinero para comprar comida. Si tienes una tienda de ropa, lo mismo. Si lo que yo me vi, por ejemplo, es, yo tengo una amiga que tiene un negocio que son de contadores. Entonces, lo que ella está haciendo ahora gratis a sus clientes, a la comunidad donde ella vive, es, ella está dando consejos gratis financieramente, a familias para ayudarlos, que en lo que es lo mejor forma de usar los dólares del CARES Act o cómo pueden manejar el PPE loan y que lo que tienen que hacer por el PPE loan y está haciendo totalmente gratis. Ese es un ejemplo buenísimo de poner esas palabras en acción.
Wow, me encanta ese concepto de tomar acción, no solamente que se queden en palabras, sino demostrar con acciones. Yo creo que como cliente uno lo recibe mucho mejor y se le queda para el futuro pensando esa imagen de la compañía que en tiempos difíciles ellos tomaron acción, como por ejemplo los que ustedes mencionaron. Muchas gracias. La siguiente pregunta tiene dos partes. Por ejemplo, el equipo con el que yo trabajo no es un experto en tecnología. ¿Qué maneras podemos comunicarnos con nuestros clientes cuando no somos expertos en usar la tecnología? Y además, ¿cuáles son algunas de las herramientas que son gratuitas o de bajo costo que podemos utilizar para comunicarnos con nuestros clientes? Aileen, ¿quieres empezar con esta?
posible que dependiendo en el negocio particular, que a lo mejor no se necesita una solución que sea ultra tecnológica para poder comunicarse con sus clientes. A veces WhatsApp o mensajes en texto, a lo mejor eso es apropiado, a lo mejor también mandamos mensajes por correo electrónico, también puede ser apropiado. Depende en el tipo de clientela, depende en las preferencias de esas personas, en qué tipo de comunicación ellos prefieren. Un negocio pequeño donde a lo mejor nada más que haya 1, 2, 3 personas trabajando en ese negocio, el comunicarse con sus empleados puede ser tan fácil como tomar el teléfono y hacer una llamada o comunicarse, como le digo, por WhatsApp. So, depende, claro, en el negocio y depende en la información que uno ya haya colectado sobre sus clientes. Si nada más que tiene email, entonces por email hay que empezar. Si nada más que tiene los teléfonos, vamos a decir, de sus clientes, bueno, por ahí entonces tenemos que empezar, si es por texto, si es por llamada, dependiendo en el volumen. So, no necesariamente siempre tenemos que buscar una solución que sea un pedazo de software o algo que sea basado en la computadora o en la nube. Algunas veces puede ser algo un poquito más sencillo.
Claro, y también yo quiero usar el ejemplo del servicio que me ayuda con la grama. Lo que están haciendo ellos a través de la pandemia es, están usando sus empleos como marketing, porque el servicio que ellos hacen es un servicio que cambia y van a diferentes lugares. Entonces, el camión es marketing. Si tienes el logo grandísimo en el camión. También están poniendo señales y posters en la grama de mi área. Cuando terminen la grama, ponen un póster hecho por tal y tal y tal y tal. Eso es súper cool. Y todos ahora mis vecinos saben que ese servicio hace mi grama. Ahora, también es algo bien tradicional. No es WhatsApp y no es por la computadora. Es como a mí me gusta decir old school, ¿verdad? Es algo bien tradicional. Pero al mismo tiempo, él está usando diferentes formas y nuevas formas de comunicarse también. Por ejemplo, cuando teníamos el huracán que estaba viniendo, Isaías, ¿verdad? Isaías. Él mandó un mensaje por email a todos los clientes diciendo, mira, voy a usar Duro. Duro es una aplicación online que te puedes usar para hacer como diferente, para organizarse el día y la semana. Entonces me mandó un mensaje y me dijo, mira, si quieres que yo me vengo a tu casa para quitar las hojas de la palma, porque viene estos huracán, por favor, va a Duro y elige el día y la hora. Perdón, la hora y me voy a tu casa. Y eso es porque esa crisis es 2 o 3 días. Y él sabía que iba a tener clientes llamando todo el tiempo, mira, tiene que venir a mi casa, mira, tiene que venir a mi casa. Yo sé que viene una vez al mes, pero necesito que vengas el sábado para quitarme la hoja de la palma. Tengo esto, tengo la otra. Entonces, él, para evitar ese problema, mandó ese mensaje primero y claro que fue mucho más eficiente. Y también para nosotros, porque para mí, yo le vi como muy proactivo mandarme ese mensaje antes que yo me descubrí que eso fue un problema que yo tenía que arreglar antes que el huracán. Entonces, para mí también me relajó, porque es como que yo me pensé, mira, que él está evitando el problema, él está encima de todo, yo no tengo que preocuparme de eso, yo puedo preocuparme por estas cosas en vez de estas cosas.
Gracias por esos ejemplos de cómo comunicarnos con nuestros clientes y las herramientas. Ahora tenemos preguntas de nuestra audiencia y la pregunta que están haciendo es la siguiente. Cuando está desarrollando su mensaje, ¿qué importancia o qué tanta importancia tiene la empatía, especialmente durante una crisis? So, cuando se está haciendo el mensaje, ¿qué tan importante es tener empatía en el mensaje durante una crisis?
Yo creo que es bien importante porque, de nuevo, como había dicho antes, al fin del día todos somos humanos y todos somos personas que están pasando en estos momentos por algo difícil. El saber que la persona al otro lado de ese mensaje le importa lo que yo estoy pensando, lo que yo estoy pasando, me hace sentir mejor. Entonces, esto mismo que estaba diciendo Leslie, el Señor que viene y me está quitando una preocupación de encima. En lo más básico, me va a quitar las hojas de la palma, que a lo mejor eso no hubiera sido la cosa mayor que hubiéramos estado pensando en ese momento. Oh, hay que buscar agua, hay que buscar gasolina, si está el generador listo, todo eso. A lo mejor la palma estaba al 5, 6, 7, 8, pero es algo que esa persona salió del día a día, dijo, esto es algo que yo le puedo resolver, déjeme saber cuándo le conviene. Eso le ayuda a una persona a decir, ok, verdad, esta persona está encima de esto, ahora yo me puedo concentrar en otras cosas. Si el mensaje es, yo entiendo, cliente mío, que usted está pasando por dificultades, yo entiendo que no puede conseguir las cosas que necesita para hacer su día a día más eficiente o más sano, pero le puedo ofrecer esto. Entonces yo creo que como cliente yo digo, no, mira, esa persona sabe, entiende lo que yo estoy pasando, me está ayudando. Y yo creo que eso deja en uno una sensación, unos sentimientos positivos. Al fin del día, todo lo que nosotros estamos haciendo está basado en relaciones unos entre los otros. Y esa relación positiva ayuda al más allá cuando yo vuelva a necesitar de ese producto o de ese servicio. Esta persona pensó en mí, ahora yo puedo pensar en ese negocio de nuevo. So, yo creo que es algo muy positivo.
Gracias. Ahora vamos con nuestra última pregunta para poner un punto final a la discusión del día de hoy y cerrar después con las reflexiones y comentarios finales. La última pregunta que tengo para ustedes el día de hoy es esta. En este momento no tengo buenas noticias que dar a los grupos de intereses míos. ¿Debería de comunicarme con ellos de que no tengo estas buenas noticias que dar? Y si sí, ¿cuáles son las mejores maneras de comunicar estas no buenas noticias?
Wow, ok. Sí tiene que comunicar cuando no tiene buena noticia, pero antes de comunicarse, primero tiene que saber todo lo diferente, los puntos, todo que puede ser parte de lo que va a suceder con esa crisis. También tiene que hablar con un abogado o con su general counsel de lo que quiere decir y lo que puedes decir de lo que está pasando. Porque es posible que al principio lo único que te puedes decir es, mira, estamos en el medio de una investigación, vamos a resolver lo que pasó y quédate con nosotros porque sí, vamos a resolver esto. Encima de eso, lo más importante es esas audiencias, como estuvimos hablando antes, que lo más importante es tienes que comunicarse con tus empleos primero, porque si tus empleos ven en el televisor o ven el mismo email que te vas a mandar a sus clientes, te vas a tener problemas. La relación que tienes con tus empleos es la relación más importante porque es tus empleos en el medio de una crisis que te van a ayudar y defender. Entonces, ellos tienen que saber primero lo que está pasando. Segundo, tienen que comunicarse con esas agencias o esas agencias administrativas y después a la comunidad. y después a sus clientes de lo que está pasando.
Y también nunca es fácil, claro, cuando uno tiene malas noticias o noticias dificultosas, no es un proceso agradable, claro. Entendiendo que a lo mejor se van a aislar algunos de sus clientes, algunas personas que no van a sentirse cómodas ya trabajando con ustedes, pero es necesario y es mejor salir adelante con esa información que a lo mejor dificultosa, a lo mejor negativa, pero si regresamos a lo que habíamos hablado antes, que la información tiene que ser dada honestamente, con el más detalle posible en lo que ha pasado y lo que se va a hacer moviendo adelante para solucionar ese problema y que no se repita cuando estamos hablando más de esa crisis que sea más organizativa, es importante. El cliente necesita saber, porque si no, nos vamos a estar basando en rumores, o yo oí que fue esto y que pasó aquello, y eso no ayuda a nadie, porque no está basado en nada real. Está basando en lo que está diciendo la gente. Bueno, la gente no siempre sabe lo que está pasando dentro de una organización. So, dificultoso, sí, pero necesario también.
Gracias. Definitivamente hay que comunicarse, así sean malas noticias o no tan buenas. Tenemos otra pregunta de nuestra audiencia. Esta es una muy buena pregunta. Es la siguiente. ¿Debería estar yo o mi negocio en todas las plataformas de redes sociales? ¿Cómo puedo manejar todas estas redes sociales?
El tema de esta discusión es depende, ¿verdad? Todo depende en su industria, todo depende en sus clientes, de dónde están sus clientes, todo depende en lo que tú tienes el tiempo y poder para hacer, ¿no? Entonces vamos a empezar con el primero, ¿no? Tu industria. Entonces, si tú estás en una industria de servicios sociales, tiene que estar en social media. Si estás en una industria de negocios como abogado, a contador, es posible que es mejor estar en LinkedIn. El segundo es tus clientes y las edades de tus clientes. Si tus clientes son más mayores, es mejor estar en LinkedIn o en Facebook, porque ahí es la población de tus clientes. Si tienes un negocio, lo cual tus clientes son más menores, son jóvenes de 20 años, 22 años, 23 años, mejor estar en TikTok o en Instagram. Pero lo más importante es lo que tú tienes el tiempo para hacer. Porque si te vas a estar en Instagram o en Facebook o en LinkedIn, tienes que tener el tiempo de hacer los mensajes a menudo. Tienes que hacerlo constantemente. Y si te empieza con 3 o 4 o 5, no te vas a tener el tiempo para hacer todos bien. Es mejor empezar con una, hacerlo muy bien, tener esa, como el ritmo de esa y después empezar con otra. Si tienes el tiempo primero y segundo, que los clientes están ahí también.
Gracias, Leslie. Y una última pregunta de nuestra audiencia, Aileen, es la siguiente. ¿Cuándo deberíamos planear? Ok, estoy leyendo la pregunta. Entiendo que la pregunta es ¿cómo deberíamos de planear volver al mercado como de costumbre? O sea, volver otra vez a la normalidad. Aquí es que después de esta pandemia, ¿cómo sabemos cuándo deberíamos planear volver al mercado como de costumbre?
depende, ese es el tema, depende, ¿no? Esto siendo una situación completamente diferente. No es como si tenemos un libro de reglas que dice, oh, así es como va a terminar la pandemia y a partir de esta fecha ya todo regresa a la normalidad. Creo que tenemos que tener bastante paciencia y bastante flexibilidad y ver cómo las cosas van cambiando día a día. Desafortunadamente, todos los días hay algo diferente, cambian las cosas y las reglas cambian, las leyes cambian. En estos momentos yo creo que nos tenemos que dar un poquito de latitud y entender que a lo mejor ese plan de largo plazo no lo tenemos listos en ese momento, que tenemos que planear un poquito más a corto plazo por ahora y ver cómo van cambiando las cosas hasta que lleguemos a esa situación donde, ok, ya los casos están a sus niveles más bajos, si hay una vacuna, si hay lo que vaya a pasar más adelante. Pero creo que es importante entender que en estos momentos de verdad que estamos lidiando día a día.
Muchísimas gracias, Aileen y Leslie. Y gracias también de nuevo a nuestro patrocinador del taller, Wood Forest National Bank. Antes de terminar esta sesión de hoy, quería preguntarles si tienen algunas reflexiones finales o comentarios finales que quieran compartir.
De nuevo, go ahead, Leslie.
Ok, bueno, como no hemos decidido mucho, es primero tener que pensar en las audiencias, primero, los empleos, tus clientes, el condado, el gobierno, diferentes agencias y administraciones. Eso es primero, y saber esas audiencias al principio. Segundo es pensar y empezar ahora a tener todo que te vas a necesitar por esa crisis antes que llegue el crisis. Tener todo en una forma que la puede conseguir y leer rápidamente, si es en papel o si es en Dropbox o si es en un flash drive. Segundo, que toda la comunicación, tercero, perdón, que no puedo contar hoy, tercero, que toda la comunicación que te vas a enviar tiene que ser honesto y transparente, y esa comunicación tiene que llegar y tiene que mandarlo a menudo. Todo el tiempo tiene que estar comunicando con esas audiencias de lo que está pasando con tu negocio. Si es algo de las horas o si es algo del gobierno que están diciendo ahora, mira, ahora todos los negocios tienen que cerrar a las 11. Y parte de esa es también esa comunicación que está mandando a menudo, cuando está mandándolo honestamente y transparentemente, también tiene que tener compasión. Y esa compasión y esa emoción tiene que ser activo, no pasivo. Entonces, tiene que vivir esas palabras en lo que está haciendo con su negocio durante esa crisis, porque ese te va a ayudar con la relación y poner esa relación en forma mejor para que te puede sobrevivir esa crisis cuando termine.
Gracias. No, y también, yo sé que lo hemos hablado y que muchas personas lo están diciendo, pero creo que es importante recordar que todos estamos en esto juntos y que son tiempos difíciles para todo el mundo, para empresas grandes, negocios pequeños, para las maestras, para los médicos, en diferentes maneras, pero que tenemos que tener esa paciencia y tenemos que entender que la persona con quien estamos comunicando también está pasando por momentos difíciles. Entonces, hay que tener, sí, esa compasión y ser flexible, que a lo mejor lo que funcionó por 5, 6, 7 años en estos momentos no está funcionando, hay que hacer algo un poquito diferente.
Gracias de nuevo, Leslie. Gracias de nuevo, Eileen. Ha sido un placer compartir con ustedes esta hora en este taller de mercadeo en tiempos de crisis. De nuevo, muchas gracias. Y ahora quería pasar el micrófono a Maguana Jean de Wood Forest National Bank, nuestra patrocinadora del taller. Muchas gracias. Y Maguana, la palabra del año es estás en mute. Eso...
Ok, mejor ahora. Muchas gracias, Eduardo. Y también muchas gracias a nuestras panelistas, Leslie Cantaya Franco y Aileen Izquierdo, por su presentación y su tiempo, y también a todos que han participado. Lo invitamos a visitar nuestra sala de exposiciones virtual. También a registrarse y acompañarnos al próximo miércoles 26 de agosto para ronda de información, conexión y inspiración. Muchas gracias, que tengan usted un buen día.